welcome to the Logosphere. I'm here as always with JD Roof.
Hello.
And today we are very fortunate to have with us Chris Thomas. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Also goes by CT. And Chris is a former NFL player, Super Bowl champion, and now is a physical and mental game mentor. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about what that is and how you got there?
Yeah, so initially when I started working with athletes, I was working exclusively with wide receivers, which is my background. I played 8 years in the NFL and I was a wide receiver, and so that was my background. I was asked to go help out with some wide receivers for a day at a local high school where I live. That turned into a full-blown coaching gig, and it was my first opportunity to really intertwine kind of a mental approach to development with a technical approach to development and watch kids do extraordinary things very quickly. And coaches, parents were blown away by it. I myself was. I'd never indulged in it. And then that led to me working with wide receivers in a private instructional environment that was more of a learning institution than it was like a camp. And I watched people just, take themselves to another dimension on every level of development, mainly mental, because the technical part is easy, right? It's not a hard thing to learn when you understand the nuances of how to do X or Y or Z, but the mental part is a huge part that literally transforms the way you exist on every level, technically and emotionally and psychologically and intellectually. So I got into that in 2005, meaning like my own program. And up until about 4.5 years ago, it was exclusively wide receivers. And then one moment led to me being in front of people who were not wide receivers.
When was your NFL career? Just to get a timeline.
So yeah, it was 93 to 2001. It was a long time ago that I played in the NFL. And so, yeah, right after that, I transitioned. I finished school because I never had a chance to finish school while I was playing. Or before I left, I got hurt coming out of college, and so I missed 2 quarters because I was, going to training camps and stuff like that, or mini camps for the NFL. And my injury prevented me from writing for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So I ended up going back to school and finishing, and then that's when I transitioned into kind of life after football. But so that program took root kind of in 2005 and has existed ever since, but it's evolved immensely on a number of different levels.
Did you have a mentor of your own? I mean, what lent you to think that this mental aspect of the game would be worth exploring, or the importance of it?
Yeah, my mentor was circumstance and experience. That honestly was my mentor. I would say that, and I can honestly say I didn't even think about it at the time. My first day in the NFL, a coach walked in and looked at all of us. Very first statement he ever made was, "Get ready, man. The game's about to become 85% mental and 15% physical." And you hear that, and it's so easy to dismiss because I've never heard anyone mention that before, but 2, you don't even know what that means. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, what do you say? I don't know, something about the mind or something like that. It's like, dude, I have no clue. But, in an hour from now, when we go out to practice, I'm going to go try to out-athlete the guy across from me, because that's all you know. And you got there in the NFL because you were a dynamic athlete. You could do better than others. You did better on the big stage. They saw it. They want to give you a chance to fulfill a dream. So I would say that was the first time, like, as I amassed all this information about the mind that, ironically, I didn't really consider until after I left the game, that I looked back and went like, well, now that was the moment that, like, obviously I started, like, really unlocking what he qualified as 85% of the game.
Did you amass this information about the mind outside of sports, outside of athleticism? Is it an interest you had before you got into the game, or something that you'd been exploring the whole time along, or no?
Never, because you had no reason to, right? I always got what I wanted. It always felt relatively easy, to go out there and do what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. So when you're having success, like, you feel like there's nowhere else to look.
Right.
Like everything's working right now, right?
Yeah.
So I really didn't. I would tell you that as I understood the mind, there were certainly very specific qualities that are huge elements of the mind that I innately had, right?
Such as?
So I would tell you that, most people in my experience working with athletes for 16 years, most people, one of their greatest fears is letting other people down. One of their greatest fears is not living up to an expectation. one of their greatest fears is failing, right? Like, I never, ever feared. I really didn't. I was so hungry for success and so competitive with myself, which is by itself maybe one of the greatest assets that I had. Because most people, their competition is what's around them, a coach, someone they're competing with, teammates, that's their competition. And that, unfortunately, just drains your energy investing in things you don't control. For me, like, I was that guy who, if you played a board game with and I was 11 years old or 10 years old and I didn't win, like, we're playing again, right? Like, I'm not getting up until, I don't care if it's 9 hours, like, we're not getting up until I win. And like, that was my MO. Like, everybody knew that that's how I was. So,
and you consider that to be a healthy trait looking back?
For me, it was.
Yeah.
For me, it absolutely was. Because
for others, would you say it could not be?
I would say that, there was an element of perfectionism in the things that I did, which, again, for me, were healthy because I didn't judge myself as being bad when I didn't necessarily get what I wanted. I became more driven and more relentless about that pursuit, right? So for me, it was healthy. It was like, oh, no. I refuse to accept that. For a lot of people, their perfectionism paralyzes them in the next moment because now they're fearful that whatever they didn't like about the moment before is going to happen again. So that perfectionism is completely unhealthy. But for me, it was like, it made me never stop. Like, I refuse to let you stop me from getting what I want. So, like,
well,
I'd be hungry.
I was going to ask, so what drove you to football? Because, I mean, you whoop my ass at basketball, like, on a regular basis, right? You're not a basketball player, really, right? You never played professional or anything.
No.
But you seem like you're a well-rounded sports guy, right? What drove you to football at such a young age?
I just remember seeing it on TV, right?
Oh,
like,
okay.
the Rams were my team as a kid growing up. Eric Dickerson, who was their Hall of Fame running back, was my hero, right,
Yeah.
as a sports personality, and that's what I wanted to be. So when you're a kid, and you're playing football on the street, you start visualizing being that guy.
Right.
So as a 7 or 8 year old, I remember writing in a journal. I actually saw it that one day I'm going to play professional football. It was really, really fascinating.
Oh, you wrote that down?
I did, yeah. And
Wow.
you really have no idea what it means. You don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
anything in regards to what it involves to get there.
Right.
And you just certainly don't play for the money. You're just like, hey, that right there looks super cool. I want to be one of those guys. So that's where it started. And then I didn't even play until I was in high school. My mom wouldn't let me play. She was, didn't know football, was worried that I was going to get hurt.
Not even flag football?
Nothing. That didn't exist, when I was a kid. That didn't exist. You know what I mean?
You said mom didn't want you to play?
She was not having any part of it.
Man, it's just my sister right now and her husband it's a very stereotypical fight, but their son is playing football and he's getting to that point where it's time to tackle, or find a different extracurricular activity.
Yeah.
And mom has put her foot down. It's not going to happen. Haven't you seen all the, studies on CTE and everything that's going on? And dad's like, wants to push his son to do it.
Go forward, son. Yeah.
But just that argument of, like, healthy risk taking, the benefits of competition, of team sports, and there's risks that come along with it, and are they worth it?
Yeah. I think there's an age where I would have no problem with my son playing football, and that's a whole other conversation. But I do think that today's day and age of football compared to football 20 years ago is apples to oranges. I think you're comparing two completely different protocols, environments, equipment, everything,
just the way the game's
awareness,
changed
like everything
around that issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you were ever going to play football, now's the time you would actually want to play because
Right.
it's the safest they've ever made it. So that's the irony, is like people are sort of shying away from a sport that ironically is probably as safe as it's ever been. And there's always risk. I mean, there are girls that that I work with in soccer, and they have teammates who get concussions playing soccer, and they get 3 in soccer and they can't play soccer again. It happens in basketball, it happens in hockey. I mean, there's always a risk.
The harder
right?
thing to quantify is the risk of not doing it, right? Because you might not get a concussion, but you risk who you are in the world, because you didn't undertake something that was worthwhile.
Yeah, that's always a slippery slope.
And there can be all kinds of hazards there.
Yeah, that's always a slippery slope. I remember consulting with someone, and the parents really wanted to help this person, and they were not, didn't have a sports background at all. Like they were all academic, and knew nothing about sports on any level. I'm talking to the parents. They admitted such. And this kid was really struggling with hockey. but apparently talented, and I was on a couple different teams, but like was in the absolute abyss and just could not play, and was just so fearful, so much pressure, so much anxiety, and the mom had mentioned to me that we're thinking he's just not figuring this out, and we're going on 2 different teams and we're investing all this money, and I'm just thinking like if he can't figure this out here really soon, then we're just gonna take him out of this sport entirely, because it's just not worth it. And so my first question was, well, does he love it? And she said yes. And I said, well, then that's the worst thing that you could do. If he's willing to take on the challenge of finding himself in this sport, he's telling you he loves it enough to stay there and to fight this battle. So if you take that from him, you're going to send him into a very negative emotional place.
If he loved it, in what way was it not working out?
I think he wanted to be so good that this is the whole perfectionism thing. I think he wanted to be so good that anytime he wasn't good in any given moment, he felt like he was failing and he was bad. And
so
then that
emotionally, it was hard on him because
100%.
of the way he responded to competition and failure and everything that goes along with trying to excel at something like that.
Yeah, like one comment from a coach, constructive or otherwise, would be like, "Oh, I'm crappy," and so that's the interpretation.
And they had to deal with him at home,
Yeah, so
feeling bad about himself
so
and
it's a challenging
losing
thing.
sleep and
It's a challenging thing, and so he did not know how to overcome it.
But then they cave to that, right? The opposite. The one option is to say this is too hard and let's just pull out of the fire. But then what does that do to someone?
Well, and then that's a whole other conversation, right? Like you're not teaching them how to move beyond something that is an obstacle, right? And life is going to require you to learn how to battle for the space that you want, right? That's just, there's no way around it.
Then you learn I am someone who can't overcome obstacles.
100%. Like I retreat.
Yeah.
Right? Well, then once you retreat, it's like you start all over again. You know what I mean? And like, because the battle's coming again, right? So it's not like you've progressed beyond it and you've learned anything about how to move towards what you want. All you've done is taken yourself back to the starting point. It's going to happen again. And all you know now is to retreat again. So you'll be on the hamster wheel, right? But no, it's amazing. It's amazing how all you need someone to want to do is overcome and move forward. That's all you need someone to recognize is that I don't like where I am and I want to be somewhere different. Because once they give you that, then they're going to be open-minded about the possibilities to find a different space, right? And so that's kind of where I come in with athletes like that is you give them the pathway to think differently. I mean, this kid, we literally talked on the phone an hour and 20 minutes, 3.5 hours before he's about to play like a huge playoff game. And like, so think of how illogical that is to be dealing with someone who has that much anxiety, that much fear, to the point where the parents are going to pull him out of a sport that he loves. And, I get a call in a panic. We weren't supposed to talk for 3 weeks. I get a call in a panic about he needs you like now. Can you talk to him? Like, I got athletes. I can do it at this time. Like, what time is this game? It's at like 4:30. I'm like, okay, well, we can talk. It's the power of, it's the power of unlocking your mind. This kid, I'll spare you the gory details, but this kid was so attentive and just absorbing everything we talked about. He's 14 years old, super smart kid. And just, as we were talking and kind of finishing our conversation, I just heard him go like, wow, like, this is crazy. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, I just had no idea that I could even think this way. And I said, well, do you think that the things we just talked about you can put into play, like in an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it is? He's like, yeah. And I said, I'm being honest. Do you feel like you can let yourself go do that, knowing that whatever you were doing isn't working? He goes, I can. He did it. It was the most insane thing. Like he ended up taking his team to the next level because he ended up in the last quarter of the game, they were down by 3 goals. And in like his shift of like 2 minutes, he scored 4 goals. And I get a text from the mom like, I don't know what you said to him, but I've never seen him play like this. This was insane. He texted me to let me know.
You're hired.
But, yeah, you know what I mean? But this is the thing. It's like with anything, what you need to give people is one moment. Like one moment of enlightenment.
Right.
Where they're like, whoa, like that took me to a place I'd never been. I want more of that.
Now, when you're sort of an interventionist of sorts, right? You interact with people who are discouraged, and you look for an opportunity to give them that one moment, as you put it. Yeah. But when you go into a situation like that, I imagine you can't just be ready with a bunch of canned lines. There's probably things you said over the years, but when you you just go confront that space and just start talking to someone, and then you kind of help them walk out of it together?
Yeah, it shows in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's obvious why we're meeting. It's because they have something going on emotionally, so we're literally sitting down in like a consultation environment. And I have this assessment that athletes fill out. So before we even sit down, I know exactly how they feel, right? And they're very transparent. I think a lot of people might assume, well, a 14-year-old's not going to be that transparent. No, they're 100% transparent. So in those situations, it's very obvious why we're there. In other situations, they might not need that, but they have things that they're battling emotionally. And it lends me the opportunity to take them out on the field and introduce them to this completely different game with the ball or their instrument or whatever it is. And in that, start breaking down like what's actually going on. So yes, we're creating this different connection with you and your instrument, but we're also creating a different emotional response to you and your instrument. So like in that moment, you literally are teaching someone like how to think completely different and create a different definition of, you know, things like judgment and perfectionism and expectations and pressure and fear of failure. So usually it starts with judgment. And so we have that conversation in that moment when they just did something that they've never been able to do. And then you break down like why, right? Like, and so it's like a brilliant moment. Why they're able to do something they've never done.
Do they know? Is there an explanation for it?
They know when I explain it. Yeah, like what I asked you to do was this, and I asked you to play this different game with the ball with a different connection, different intention, different hyper focus. And I didn't ask you if you could do what I'm asking you to do. I just asked you to let yourself do what I'm asking you to do. And because you know that in order to achieve something as finite as what I'm asking you to do, you know your mind has to go to a place that's very narrow because all your energy has to be directed towards what you want because nothing else matters. Like we both have acknowledged like there's no reason for you to be perfect doing this. So rather than attempt to do that, why don't you play the game I'm instructing you to play? So they let themselves do it very quickly. And then immediately you start getting them to process information, which is probably the hardest thing for athletes to do who are in a judgmental state of mind. Everything that revolves around not getting what they want goes into a place of judgment, right? That was bad, oh crap, I'm going to do that again. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And then it's like the snowball, right? But in an instant, you're like, okay, well, why did that happen? Well, I was supposed to have my foot like this and it hit the side of my foot. Okay, so what do you think you need to do differently? Well, I need to see the ball right here and it hits this. Okay, awesome, show me. And then they do it, something like they otherwise would never even process, and then they have like this perfect moment. You're like, that was absolutely phenomenal. Did you feel that? I did. How did that feel? That felt amazing. So do you know why that happened? And that's where we talk, right? And then, okay, so do it again. Okay, so do it again. And before you know it, you have people doing things where they're like, this is crazy that I could do this in one day. I mean, it's the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. I mean, playing in the NFL was an amazing experience on many levels. More than anything, it was educational, and it equipped me with a pretty intensive library of knowledge. But like watching someone who's come to you completely vulnerable and someone who's come to you not having a clue how to find the space, where they could live, and in an hour and 15 minutes, like, go to this space where they're like, in my lifetime, I didn't know that I could do what I just did. Like, that's the open door right there, right? Like, that's the crack in the door. It's like, okay, well, now that you've like tasted that door is busting open.
Do you
But you know what, though? It's so much like people that are struggling with drugs and alcohol because they're vulnerable. And then they get somebody gets in front of them and gives experience, strength, and hope of like, oh, yeah, I did that too. And, I went through this. And then they get that glimmer and they go, oh, okay, maybe I could do what he's doing, right? And then maybe they do what I'm doing, right? They go and they help somebody else out, or they look inwardly and they discover that, oh, maybe this story, I need to reframe it, right? I got a wrong frame around it. And bam, you see the lights come on, right? That's what we call it. That's what we call it in our anonymous program we're a part of. The lights come on, and you feel it as it's like this connection.
Oh, yeah.
And, man, it's so funny. And then another thing that came into my mind, this is going to sound weird, though. It's almost like you're Gandalf, the Grey, right? And Bilbo's like the Hobbit that's called to a venture, right? Because everybody wants to go on an adventure. I'm thinking, like, when you guys are talking, I'm thinking everybody needs to be called, like, go on this adventure, especially when you're a teenager, right? And if you don't do it, like if you get out of the sport because the parents say it's no good or whatever, right? What we were talking about before, you're like lacking that calling, right? We want to go out into the world and
Yeah.
like face the dragons,
Yeah.
right?
We also want to stay in the Shire where it's nice
Yeah,
and comfortable.
right, where there's a nice river and fish and food and everything like that. But
And the task at hand is too big and too dark and too
right.
scary.
And
Yeah.
what Gandalf
But
did,
it's
like
there.
in the story, like it's so funny. This sounds so weird, but what Gandalf does, he's a wizard, right? He's not really doing he's just talking and he's just kind of mentoring the person, Bilbo or Frodo through these crazy adventures, and they grow, right? It's like a spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So,
the funny thing
yeah,
is like
it's
they,
crazy.
they want that adventure. They want that journey.
Yeah.
They have never been equipped with the ability to like take the journey.
Right.
And be okay with just like one night I might not have food. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like and I might be on the brink of like starving, but then I gotta go fish or I gotta go hunt or so just to your point, it's like they want the journey, they just don't know how to battle, for where the journey is going to take them. You know what I mean? And they don't know how to like take the journey without the journey having to end here, or else like if it doesn't end there, then this journey was a complete waste. Or if it doesn't end there,
Right.
then I'm worthless. Or if it doesn't end here, because this is the only end point, then I'm a failure. Like that's what paralyzes them from taking the journey. Is they're moving, they're existing in the place that they like to exist, meaning like let's just use sports as an example. So someone's playing football because they love football. Someone's playing soccer because they love soccer, baseball, volleyball, whatever. But they're not at all having the experience that would allow them to move forward to have the freedom and the experience that is the quintessential experience, that you can only find by being free,
Right.
and liberated to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. And with no judgment, with
Yeah.
no, predetermined
hitting the
concept.
sweet spots,
Yeah,
like,
it's like
making plays that you just feel good. Right?
Yes.
It's like an esteemable build,
Yes.
right? Like when you make a good play, like when you make a good dig, like a hand stick with a volleyball,
Yeah.
and you do it just right, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You get up and you're like, yeah,
That was just
they
boss
yeah,
right there.
yeah, it was boss, and people
Yeah.
are like, oh, this guy,
Yeah.
we
So they don't know
we
how to
all
do that.
want that,
But they don't know how to do that.
They don't know how to do it
because they're so focused on like it's almost like they predetermined like there's no way I can catch fish.
right.
Well, have you fished? Like
Yeah.
no. But have you attempted to catch it? No. So then why are you saying there's no way you can catch fish? Well, I don't know. I've never done it, so I don't think that I could do it. It's like, okay, well, if that's your answer, then yeah, you're starving to death.
Right.
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 So what I want to prevent them from doing is starving to death. Right. It's like all you have to do is like believe that you can create the toolkit to go get what you want. And they've never understood how to do that because in our world everything revolves around the physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a hole in my game, then I need to go work harder physically or technically, and that's simply not the answer. Certainly, if you've never done that, then there's a lot of space that you can make up, but at some point there's a ceiling, and for everybody, even the most gifted athletes, right? And so you have to ask yourself too, like, if I'm a gifted athlete and then you're not as gifted an athlete and we're both doing the same thing, well, how are you ever going to pass me? Right? Like, you could work as hard as you want technically, but if I do exactly what you do, I'm always going to be better than you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like my ceiling's higher than your ceiling, right? So then how do I create an advantage for myself? Well, 66% of your world is mental.
Right.
Right? I don't mean your sports world, I mean your world.
Yeah, everything.
Right?
Yeah.
What percent?
In my world, it's 66%.
2/3 is kind of how you do it.
Yeah. So it's just crazy because, they want the quintessential experience. They don't know how to find it. And so it becomes too overwhelming, right? And so what they do is they just concede. They just concede that this is going to be my experience now. I'm just going to struggle mentally. I wouldn't say that they even know that they're struggling mentally, but I'm going to have anxiety all the time. I'm going to feel depressed. I'm going to fear failing. I'm going to screw up and have judgment. When I screw up, I'm going to have all this, paralysis that takes over my body. I'm going to have fear of failure that is exorbitantly greater. Every moment I don't get what I want, and I just accept that that's my reality.
Now, do you have any experience with meditation?
I've never really purely meditated. My meditation is a little bit different.
I mean, the stuff that you're into has a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert
It's
meditator,
so
but
yeah.
you keep using the word focus.
Yeah.
Which has a few different
Or hyper focus. You said
connotations,
hyper-focus, yeah.
but it has to do with your attention. I've been thinking, even just during this conversation, what it sounds like is people can get really hung up mentally on being very concerned about failing and the things that'll come along with it.
Yes.
And in that state of mind, you have no mental resources to pay attention to the things that you need to be paying attention to in order to do the thing that you want to do.
100%.
Right? It's this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy because of this mental bandwidth, which is being absorbed by this kind of neurotic tendency to,
And they don't know how to find that, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, our society and our culture has never equipped them with the ability to move forward where the pathway to getting what they want is through the mind. They've never been taught that.
Yeah.
So that's their greatest challenge is how do I find the space that no one's ever told me about, because they don't know that it even exists until you bring it to their attention. And then they're like,
well, that's the thing about it too, is that
think like that.
we learn about that too, like in recovery, a lot of it is there's these issues with drinking and drugging or whatever, but what you find is that that seems like it's the problem, but it's really like a solution.
Right,
it's something that people are using to self-soothe because of an angst or a discontent that they're experiencing that's happening a little bit below the level of awareness.
Yeah.
So a lot of that process of recovery is trying to develop awareness, to develop self-insight, and to get some first-hand experience into what that is.
Yeah.
Even just during our conversation, I've been having an experience with noticing, we were totally in the zone, and then I realized that the air conditioning was still on.
Oh, really?
because I didn't know it was on until I saw JD try to turn it off.
Oh, got it.
And it didn't go off. And then for about 6 minutes, I've been thinking about the air conditioning.
About you bastard.
Yeah.
I can't
Script the sound bite. God damn it.
But then that like the game right now is the conversation.
Yeah.
We're not on the football field.
Yeah.
But suddenly I don't have the resources to have the conversation because I'm stuck on. Is the mic going to pick up the air conditioning? It's not even going to pick up the air conditioning. What are you so worried about? Let's just go. Just drop it.
And then here I'm going off about Bilbo Baggins and the Hobbit.
But
what's funny about what Chris just said though is like this is one of my strengths. So I get tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Right? Like even as a kid, I get tunnel vision. It's not about anybody else. Like it's never been about anybody else for me. When I was growing up as a kid and playing, I want to go out there and be great for me. Like I never thought about a coach. I never thought about pleasing somebody. That didn't exist. So only in reaching a point where I became a mentor for athletes and a pathway for athletes did I realize how invaluable that trait was.
Right.
That is one of their greatest struggles is trying to please somebody else, right? Especially in today's day and age. Because, we won't get into it, but just even life with social media and everything else and looking for validation, that never was me. I never cared about trying to please you. I'm there to be great for me. So I get I get tunnel vision. Like even here, like I'm here. Like I didn't know what Jess was doing. I had no idea, but it didn't even faze me. I saw him get up, and it's like I'm just in this this place.
It's kind of like a super. It's like a super. It's like a superpower.
Yeah,
almost.
like
really?
I'm just connected, and even like music. So for me, you talk about meditation. For me, I'm 21 years old, and 22 years old at the time, and New Age music had just sort of come out, which is meditative, very meditative. But I used to go get a ton of New Age music, and there were moments when I'm listening to Dre and Snoop and Cube and all that. But then there's tons of moments where I needed to be one with myself and find this balance that was very frequent. Where when I come home, that's what I put on, right? I put it on and I just lose myself in it, right? It just soothes me, it calms me, it brings balance to my life. It gets me ready to be in this place where I feel like I'm not going to let my circumstances be bigger than I'm capable of being, right? Because when you're playing the NFL, and you're a guy like me who's, a bite, scratch, and crawl guy who's trying to, overcome exorbitant odds to make a team, then every day is a big day. You know what I mean? So it's that's your reality. You can't really run from that. So how do I go there with a different balance so that I don't turn this into a moment that is bigger than any other moment I've ever been into, which if I don't do that, if I don't know how to do that, then it's going to create a crazy amount of pressure that's going to change the way that I exist in this environment. So for me, that was my way to meditate, right? Where I could just go quiet and I lose myself in it, right? And it's just the most beautiful thing.
You lose your mind, right? Your mind.
I don't even think.
Yeah,
I just let myself
it's
go.
Gone. Yeah, and that's the point of meditation.
Yeah, I don't even think. I'm just close my eyes and just lose myself in this really.
But you were probably drawn to that on your own at that age, being an NFL guy. That probably, if you went and surveyed everyone in the NFL, there probably wasn't a lot of people that were getting down to.
No, I'm like the anomaly for sure. You know what I mean? But I was always very spiritual growing up.
Yeah.
And even philosophical and analytical and stuff like that. So like, you know, I take things in and I process everything that's kind of going on around me. And then I like to feel empowered. You know what I mean? Like I don't like to feel like I'm at the mercy of someone else controlling my life, right? And I was in circumstances in the NFL, inevitably they controlled my future. I had coaches that controlled my future. But how do you not let them control your experience, right? Like that's two very different things.
Yeah, you're right.
You know what I mean? Like this coach doesn't want me there. You know, I'm playing out of my mind for, you know, one of the NFL teams that I was on, and I couldn't have played any better, and I'm playing with the best receiver in the game at the time. So he's like the model, right? And meanwhile, you have the quarterback who eventually makes the Hall of Fame who's saying, like, this kid's a dude, meaning me. You have the offensive coordinator for that team, after a year of being on this team, pulling me into his office to say, if we didn't draft this guy in the first round last year, you'd be starting right now. You're a great player. You could be a great wide receiver in this league. And you're like, that's awesome. Yeah, but the head coach doesn't like you. Well, why? I have no idea. And so that becomes your reality. So that's a heavy thing to take on when you're like, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to get rewarded in life for like doing everything right? You know what I mean? Like I was like the ideal profile player. Quiet, articulate, intelligent, won every conditioning drill from the moment I showed up to that team, was a pound-for-pound guy in the weight room, was staying after 2 practices in 112-degree weather and catching balls for another 20 minutes, and then was playing amazing. Would do anything you asked me to do. And this guy found a way to hate me.
Do you have any theories?
I know now why, but regardless, it doesn't change the circumstance. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't change the circumstance. He was always going to be that guy who could prevent me from getting what I wanted. That in itself could send people into the abyss.
It could also be a great teacher, right?
For me, it's what unlocked, it's what allowed me to unlock every compartment of the mind, because I really had no choice. I wasn't contending with a physical obstacle, right? Like in terms of my game. It's not like I was like, hey, if you just go catch more balls, like, dude, you'll catch better. It's like, dude, I was catching like a phenom. It wasn't like, hey, if you just go work on your routes, you can run routes better. I was destroying people. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So like none of that was going to help. So this was all emotional. My first time really being confronted with something emotional, and I really hadn't had any practice in that, because up until the NFL, like I could drop 10 balls in a game and no one was saying one word to me, because they knew at some point I'd make plays. So they're not looking to break you down. And it's unfair, because they certainly will break somebody else down, but it is what it is, right? So this is my first time being confronted with something emotional where I'm like, dude, I'm going to lose myself in this. And it was like, it just shows you the power of the mind. It was one negative thought. I was so much bigger than the coach, and so much bigger than the toxicity that he was projecting towards me for the longest time. But then I made the team 3 weeks into that season. There was one moment where I was supposed to take a rep, and he told me to get out of there to put in, the best receiver in the NFL. And I guess he didn't like my demeanor walking behind the huddle, so he MF'd me and cussed me out for the umpteenth time, and I was like, oh my God, this dude right here, man.
That's crazy.
And so I'm just sitting there. I never said one word, right? Which is the hardest thing, because you're a competitor, right? Like the last thing you want is some man talking to you sideways like that. So the first time I did it, you just want to pick him up and body slam him, truth be told, because you're like, who do you think you're talking to? I'm a grown man. You know what I mean? But you can't do that, right? So you're left to figure out, like, how do I get beyond this? There wasn't an answer. So then, I sit out for that rep. I go get the next rep, and now I'm aware that he's to my right, where he'd always kind of stood near me, but now I was aware because he had just cussed me out, and now I'm running off to his side, so I knew he was looking at me. And so the ball comes my way, and I drop it. Not a huge deal. I hadn't dropped many balls at all. But for 5 seconds, as I went to go pick up the ball, I thought to myself, dude, you start dropping balls, this guy hates your guts. He's going to cut you. And that one moment, that one innocent moment, led me to forgetting how to catch a football the next day for 3 weeks. Like, that's not hyperbole.
Wow.
That's not an exaggeration. I literally forgot how to catch a football for 3 weeks. It was the craziest thing I'd ever experienced. I mean, I went from like being unstoppable in not even wearing gloves. No one doesn't wear gloves in the NFL because they have tack on them. They're sticky. They help you catch the ball better. I literally, from the day I got to San Francisco, and they were the best team in the NFL at the time, did not wear gloves in practice, did not wear gloves in games.
Wow.
I was that willing to like be vulnerable and risk dropping balls for the privilege of developing the strength in going like I was bigger than the fear that like I might drop a ball. No, dude, I went head on into it and was like, I'm using my hands. Whatever happens, happens. And every day I caught with my hands where I didn't drop a ball, it just was like spinach for the soul. You know what I mean? And just like, let's do it again, man. And it just fed me until the point where I was like, I'm doing it in a game. Let's go. And it didn't even faze me. And I went from that guy to overnight wearing gloves, wasn't even trying to catch with my hands. I'd go to practice and it was like a grenade coming at me. You know, like the easiest route was like the hardest thing to catch. It literally, like I psyched myself so much about it, I couldn't like see the ball with clarity to know when to get my hands out to catch it. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced, and it just destroyed me for 3 weeks. It got worse and worse.
Now you mentioned faith though. So did you turn to faith? Like has that been a cornerstone?
But I had been challenged so many times in my life. Right, honestly, God's always been my foundation. But like, I've been challenged so many times where I just had moments of just questioning like, do you truly have my back, God, or what? How many times am I gonna have to like get derailed before like you give a guy a break? Like, what's the point of living right if all you're gonna do is make me go through one other obstacle and have one other mountain to climb? Like, what's the point?
Right.
Like, there's no point in me continuing to do this in your name when I feel like I'm not getting any benefit from this. I mean, I really like the biggest moment of that questioning was when I'd gone through just a career starting as a freshman in high school all the way until I got to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. That was just like Lombardi Street in San Francisco. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a straight line. It was like just sideways and all over the place. And I was just like over it. And then finally I get to Cal Poly, spend 1 year at Cal Poly on my junior year, and I become a projected 3rd to 6th round draft choice after that at some D2 school.
Wow.
Like, the odds were against that ever happening. So then it became real. In spring football, all the scouts are sitting there on the rails watching Chris Thomas.
Right.
So it became very tangible at that point, right? Before it was just a dream. Like, there's no way with the path I've taken here, like, that's ever going to become real. And then it became real. So now you're like, oh my God, like, this is so real. It's right there. Like, I'm ready for this. And then I worked all summer, the summer before my senior year, with an NFL quarterback, NFL DB, 5 days a week. Was so prepared to go have an amazing season, go back to training camp, and scouts are still there. And like 2 or 3 days in, I pull my hip flexor. And so now I'm banged up.
Oh, so that's the injury that you were talking about? Oh, okay.
No. So that was where, so now I'm banged up.
Right.
So now I can't practice.
Right,
and then I'm limping through practice when I finally can practice. I'm stubborn, so I play in the first couple games. I'm not 100%. And finally, by the third game, I'm 100%. I'm ready to go. Got some ground to make up. 7 minutes into that game, I go to catch a ball on the sideline. Fall funny, guy lands on top of me, suffer a 3rd-degree shoulder separation. I'm done for the season.
Ugh.
So it was like, that was devastating for me. And I never felt more let down. Like, I was bitter. I was angry.
But what were you let down by yourself?
No, I felt like I was let down by God.
By God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like I've done so many things right.
Yeah.
And like, you refused to give me a break. I was so bitter, so angry, and I couldn't let it go. Like, my rehab was frustrating. I was in a splint for a month and a week. I came out of it. I lost 16 pounds, and I was this size.
Yeah.
I lost 16 pounds, and I got to figure out how to put 16 pounds back on a frame that doesn't put weight on like that. As I was trying to rehab and finally get to the point where I could train a couple months later, I got mono. It was like one thing after the next. My first NFL workout was indoors because it was raining, and I'm like running diagonal 40s on a basketball court where the wall's like 10 feet away from me. The whole thing was just a debacle.
Wow.
And I would just, every day that I had something else that was less than ideal, I was already so bitter that it was magnified. You know what I mean? Like when I had to go do my next workout, I'm running on grass at Cal Poly that's, 7 inches high, and the guy at UCLA is running on a half an inch, perfectly manicured, lawn. And I'm running on grass that's, 7 inches long, and I'm trying to run my best 40 times, and so the whole thing just angered me. And I was bitter, man. I was like, didn't want to talk to God. I was like, screw that, man. You don't have my back.
Why have you forsaken me?
Yeah. It's like, you don't have my back. Like, I'm done with you. You know what I mean? And so I was just bitter. And the moment that was like the real climax of it all was I was doing my last private NFL workout. And it was like my 6th one or something. none of them had gone exceptionally well. And so I went out and started, and I should backtrack. One of the coaches there was a former NFL guy who came there for the first year at Cal Poly when I was, suffering this injury and suffering through all this. And so he tried to kind of serve as a mentor to me and kind of guide me through my NFL workouts and tell me what they'd be like and stuff like that. So it was his first year there. And so I'm doing what amounted to my last private workout, and I'm doing these cone drills, and I slipped one time. And like the second that happened, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like I could feel just this inferno in me. I was just like furious. I was like, I'm over this. I'm done. And like he's like, it's okay, you can do it again. I remember him saying it, but like it meant nothing to me. I lined up just pissed off, and I slipped again. And I have amazing feet. There's no reason for me to be slipping, and I slipped again. It was that crappy grass. And then that like just sent me in another, emotional spasm. And then he told me I can line up again. I went to go line up again, kind of took a deep breath, slipped again. That was it. I went over to the side, sat down, and started taking off my cleats. Like this is, I to this day, as I say it every time, I can't believe I did it. I started taking off my cleats, and the guy's like, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm done." And he's like, "What's that?"
You're like, "I'm out."
And he's like, and I said, "I'm done." He goes, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm done." I never even looked at him. I was like, done. I just was literally taking off my cleats. And it just had it. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And
how did you come back from that?
That was kind of my moment where it's like, first the coach gave me like 4 or 5 minutes before he came over, like my coach from Cal Poly, because he knew I'd had it, you know what I mean? And I'm this great quiet kid, you know what I mean? And I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just felt cheated. It's like I shouldn't even be in this situation. So that's what I mean. I felt like a victim, right? So I was pissed off I was even in that situation. I felt like I got cheated.
You're mad at the grass. You're mad at the
everything.
Yeah,
F all this, man. F all you. F
yep.
all this. I shouldn't even be here in this situation, man.
Yeah.
And how you, God, could even allow this to happen? I'm most pissed off at you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's really where I was. And so, he came over and said, "Hey, CT, man, I know you're upset. I get it. But if you ever do that again, you'll never play in the NFL. Because you might not play in the NFL now because you just did that. So, you got to go home and think about that, right? So I just went home. And it was the hardest thing, man, because I just wanted to be angry, and this is why I understand. Like, I understand people who lose themselves being a victim to their circumstance and do something destructive, almost like a F you to everything and everybody.
Fuck the world.
It's like, hey, if you don't want my back, then screw it. I won't even care about who I am and what I do.
Right.
So you look for things that are actually destructive. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I could have easily done that.
There is something very intoxicating about being angry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because you feel more empowered.
Feeling a victim of sorts.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you can't fail if you never try.
Exactly.
And if your failure is just the result of the stupid world and the stupid people in it and the way things are, there's a certain self-righteous satisfaction to be had there.
Yeah.
It's easy to get stuck there.
100%. You think, well, it's like I was at the mercy of my circumstance. But I was like, nah, screw you. I don't care about that anymore. I'm just going to say F you, and now I'm going to take control of what happens next, and I'm going to choose to be destructive. Mm-hmm. So screw you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's like this really masochistic thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They call it drinking at somebody. Like for alcoholics, right? Yeah. They drink at somebody.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to drink at the boss.
Yeah.
I'm going to drink at the wife or the husband. Yeah.
And you lose in the end. Like,
but
in the moment, like you can't.
Everybody loses
so
around you, and you lose. Yeah. It's like a double negative.
Yeah, but you're so upset. You're just like, well, screw it.
Yeah.
And I want to be upset.
Yeah.
And I want to do something destructive so that it's my way of getting back at you. Right? It's like this really psychotic thing that you do. But so I went home, and it's like I had kind of that choice to make. Like, I'm like, this is real what he just said. So I got two choices. I can either stop being a victim and pick myself up and get back on this horse and ride and see where the freak it takes me. You know what I mean? Like, which I was actually so reluctant to do and almost pissed off that I was willing to do that again. You know what I mean? Like, because you feel cheated. You're like, I'm going to do it again, and you're going to freaking let me down again.
Again, yeah.
So it's like, I don't even want to do this. But you're left to kind of go, well, if I don't do that, then how do I win?
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, this is about winning. Winning in sports, winning in life, winning personally. So it's like I reluctantly was like, all right, God, I'm going to trust that you know what the hell you're doing. And I'm going to move forward with this and take this chip off my shoulder and just like invest the energy in trusting you know something I don't. And that's what I did, and then ended up having like a good pro day. Didn't get drafted, but had like 5 teams that wanted to sign me as a free agent, which can't even understand to this day how that happened, because I only worked out for one of them, and then chose one that was, you know, what was not the best situation. It was only the one that was in California, so I wanted to stay in California, and that's how I made that evaluation. And I had an agent, God bless him, was new to the business. He was the only guy left standing to be willing to represent me. Every other reputable agent, I was like a liability because they invest in you. So it's not a good investment to invest in someone who just missed a senior year, Division II college,
Injury,
is a free agent.
all
Yeah,
that
like
stuff. Yeah.
So this guy pops up out of nowhere. It's his first time in the business, and he knows nothing more than I know. So like when I chose the Chargers to go there, he signed off on it when really he should have evaluated the situation because it was horrible. And I just said, yeah, I want to be in Cali. San Diego's in Cali, so that works for me. It's like, cool, yeah, let's do it. And I get there, they got 16 wide receivers fighting for 5 spots. They got 5 guys coming back from the year before. You know what I mean? It's like, that in itself is a horrible situation. And then they gave me a number that wasn't even reflective of a wide receiver position. Like every other guy had a wide receiver number that was there except me. They gave me number 47, and that's couldn't be any further away than what a wide receiver number is. So you go there, and it's like the writing's on the wall that you don't have a chance on God's green earth to make this team. Like, and I knew that in my first mini camp. It was 5 practices in 3 days. I got 2 repetitions of anything. I literally was like the kid on the other side of the fence, like wanting to play in the basketball game, you know, and no one ever asked
Tag me in. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, so that's what I mean. Like, it never got easier. It never got easier. It was like one other thing that presented an obstacle that required me to go to another place emotionally so that I could let myself keep moving forward. Because if I didn't, and I wanted to subscribe to what my circumstance appeared to be, right? Like, this is hopeless.
Right.
You don't stand a chance. They just told you were a scrub. They only gave you 2 reps. They're not going to invite you back. Like, if you buy into that, it affects everything, right? It's going to affect how I play. It's going to affect my energy in the moment. It's going to affect, like, my attitude. It's going to make me feel hopeless. And none of that works when you're trying to be part of the 0.025% club on the planet, you know, that get a chance to do what we do.
Yeah.
So, like...
There's a lot of threads.
Yeah.
I want to go back to...
There's so many I could just throw stuff
You know what
in
I mean?
there.
So
I want to make it... I still want to
go
make it back to that coach. But I keep thinking about this little story, so I'm going to take a quick tangent, which is that I have, for some reason or other, become a very good amateur ping pong player in my life.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you're okay. I mean, I give you a run for your money.
This was like 8 years ago that JD and I played. Since then, you know, like, I've never competed, but I'm freakishly good at ping pong. And
He is. That is I can concur that.
And over time, you know, it's just like the environment that I work in, there's always ping pong tables.
Okay.
And you get to play a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And so I've just played. I've never been coached.
Yeah.
You know, but I've developed my own little philosophy for ping pong. And I've got 2 big role models. One is my father, who was the first person who showed me how to hit a ping pong.
Okay.
And he was a tennis player. And his advice for me was just get it over the net.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't try to crush it. Don't try to do anything fancy.
Yeah.
All that stuff is a bonus. Your job is just to get it over the net.
Yeah. Be Michael Chang.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm just like, you know, that game Pong, you know, that's that's my role model for ping
There
pong.
you
It's
go.
just like, you just want
Keep
to
it simple,
keep
man.
getting it back, because ultimately you're trying to make the other person
You're
make
wearing
a
them
mistake.
down. Yeah, you're wearing
You know?
them down.
100%.
Yeah. But the other role model for me when it comes to ping pong is actually professional baseball. And it's also something that I've woven in based on my experience of playing dozens of people and watching what people do when you
Sure,
play with
yeah.
them, and
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
myself and what I do and
Yeah.
what ultimately is my downfall to performing at my best.
Yeah.
And what I love about professional baseball players is the poker face, right? It's just, it's one pitch at a time. You know, you could get a strikeout against the biggest batter on the team, or they could hit a grand slam, and your job is to walk back to the mound and throw another pitch.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of celebrations. You don't see a lot of temper tantrums.
Yeah.
It does happen from time to time, but that you imagine the pressure of that moment and each, you know, inexplicable action, right? We don't even understand how people are able to throw baseballs the way they do.
Right, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the scientists studying it don't know, let alone the people throwing the balls. And you have to put yourself in a position to do that again and again
Yeah.
with this incredible amount of pressure. And so you can see there's that there's that culture, I think, in professional baseball players of being like cool, and having your head straight.
Yeah.
And with ping pong, it's like that. What you watch is that people will melt down, For me with ping pong, a lot of times someone will be neck and neck with me. We'll be 5-5, then we'll be 10-9, and then we'll be 14-11, and then we'll be 21-12 because halfway through the game they've lost it.
Yeah.
One little mistake and they just they erupt, they curse themselves, they apologize.
Yeah.
Why did I do that? And then it's over.
Yeah.
So then it's just about being able to recover from those mistakes.
Yeah.
And not to be too
golf,
to indulge
is
too
like
much
that
in
too,
those successes.
Like golf is like that too, right? Well, all professional sports are like that.
Truly, all sports are like that.
On on the level you played at too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I can't even imagine it.
Well,
it's
and
crazy.
the interesting thing about what Chris just said is that, sometimes the tantrum is a healthy thing. It depends on who you are. You can look at John McEnroe. Like, it never hurt John McEnroe. It, like, fed John McEnroe, right? Like, honestly, for me, sometimes, like, it feels great to let it out, right? In whatever way that I think I'm going to let it out right now. And it could look like I'm having a tantrum, but it's like my quick release, right? Because if I hold it in, it starts boiling inside of me. So the release makes me feel good, and then I get back to being centered, right? And it could be just anything. It could be like, dear Lord, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. It could be whatever it is, but there's this outburst that is a relief. And this is why I've never told athletes, like, I'm not telling you not to be emotional. It's how your emotions work for you, right? So, like, I don't think it's unfair to be like, hey, you're not allowed to be emotional about that. It's like, you can be emotional about whatever you want to be emotional about, so long as it's constructive. And it takes you to eventually you finding the place where you want to exist.
It's for a purpose.
Yeah. I mean, but to beat yourself up emotionally, that's a different story, right? Because that lends like no momentum. You can't move forward with that, and it's going to be destructive, right? But I mean,
that's a big part of life in general, is learning how to express. We don't want to deny or sort of push down feelings, but learn how to express them in the most appropriate way.
100%. Well, and Chris even said it, and this is a whole other topic, but the idea of pressure, right? And Chris said, the pitchers feel all this pressure and stuff, but like there's really no pressure. Like, at the end of the day, you are an artist, right? And your art is throwing a ball. You've done it enough that you probably feel like you have enough command on how to do that. And when you know how to play this very finite, infinitesimal game with you and the ball, then you feel like you definitely have ownership of what you're doing. So at the end of the day, like, there's never a moment when you don't want to execute the desired pitch, right? And sometimes the desired pitch is an intentional ball. It's an 0-2 count. You're like, I'm going to get this guy fishing in the dirt. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not even a pitch, a strike. It's like to get this guy fishing, right? But at the end of the day, like, the goal is I want to execute my desired pitch, right? Period, end of story.
Every pitch,
whatever that desired pitch is in the batting, sequence, and so, or in the count sequence, and so there's never a time where a pitcher's like, well, this time I don't want to throw my desired pitch. There's never a time a person kicking a soccer ball is like, well, this time I'm good with missing the shot.
But there's many times when they do not throw their desired pitch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, but there's never a time where we're like, well, this time I want to hit the ball out in tennis.
Yeah.
Well, this time I want to drop the football. Like, you never say that. The goal is always the same. The goal.
What's interesting is the time when there are many times when the pitcher does not throw their desired pitch, but there are some times when the pitcher always throws his desired pitch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's some guys who are
It's
just
like the zone.
Not that they
That's
do
the
it every
zone.
time, but they
it's the
get
zone.
it. Like, what happens in that place? And I've been there.
no
like
hitters.
all of a sudden there's
Yeah.
no barrier between.
Yeah.
Yeah. They call it like a flow state, right? Is one way to put
That's
it.
it.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean. So, like, there's never a moment you're like, well, this time I don't want the desired result. Every single moment you ever do whatever it is you're doing, you want the desired result, right? So if that's true, well, then what is pressure? Like, this time you have to throw a strike? Like, this time you have to throw your desired? No, you don't.
Yeah.
Like, when did I ever not want to throw the desired
it comes back, I think, to what you talked about early on, which is how you incorporate others and others' approval of what you do.
But it's
Their
it's
perception.
It's
their perception.
it's if I as a pitcher, it's like if I don't throw this pitch, if I give them right down the middle at the wrong time in the count and they hit it and the game is over, then suddenly it's my fault
I let the
because
team down.
I'm responsible for throwing this across the plate.
Yeah.
I didn't do it the way that I desired to do it, and
Yeah.
because of that, everyone loses.
Yeah.
All the fans go home
100%.
unhappy.
And there's always that risk.
Yeah.
Right? There's always that risk, which is why we do what we do, because we accept the challenge, we accept the vulnerability to that risk. So the second I accept that, then at that point, it doesn't matter if you're willing to accept it or not. If you want to be delusional about the fact that there's imperfection in everything that we do, and the imperfection could be I give up a banger for the game winner, then that's your prerogative. But that doesn't change the fact that you think it was my goal to give up a banger at the end of the game. So if
Right.
you dislike that and you want to get emotional about that and you want to, look at me or view me a certain way about that, that's your prerogative. It doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, like every day I come out here, I want to be great for me. Right? And
It's
so
an
that's
old
my
cliche.
game.
It's an old cliche.
Right?
I mean,
Yeah.
you learn that early on in sports or in life. It's like, do your best, right? It sounds a little bit cliche, but
But do your best in the moment.
Then even
Yeah.
if you lose,
You
you can go
You left
home.
it all out on the field, right?
Yeah.
That's another one. Leave
Even
it all
if
at
you
the
lose,
field.
you win.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
the victory is that I wasn't fearful to go fight for the success that I wanted. Right? Like that's the victory. Like, are you fighting for the success that you want? Are you fighting for the place that you want? Are you giving yourself the best chance to get it? Right? Like that ultimately is the game.
And the stuff you've gotten really into too, it's really early lessons we learn about being a good sport and a bad sport. It's like it's something that you just learn at an early age, and you kind of understand what that means.
Yeah, we all
But-
have different temperaments, by the way. Like
Right.
some of the kids, you see at age 8 and they're already like spastic, and they're climbing out the walls. I mean, there was a kid that we used to play with who took his bat and he was slammed it against the dugout fence.
That
you know
was
what
me.
I mean? When
That
he
was
was
me.
9
Yeah.
years old. So it's like I don't think anyone taught him that. I think
No.
honestly, I think his parents put a little pressure on him to be the best, right?
Right.
But not his best, but the best, right? Which is a joke. But so I think people are just kind of have their own disposition, and then they have to figure out how to temper that. That was me. Like I literally would. You wouldn't want to be on my team as a kid, when I was 11 or 12, and you made a mistake, because back then I didn't know how to control my intensity. Like if I didn't get what I wanted and it was because of you, like I was gonna let you hear about it. You know what I mean? And so
You would Michael Jordan them.
yeah, 100%. I was very much like Michael Jordan.
Yeah,
Did you watch The Last Dance,
I
by
did.
the way?
Yeah, it was
It's great.
amazing.
Yeah.
And not that I'm Michael Jordan, but there were so many similarities to
Yeah.
what fed me as an athlete, how I moved forward as an athlete. Even when I play, when I was playing basketball, before I started playing with Jess and stuff, like five years ago, up until 10 years ago, I used to play 3-on-3 on this other side of the gym that I attend, and sometimes 4-on-4. We play half court, and I got stuck with guys that they stuck the guys with me who were not very good because they felt like I could take over a game, so they put me with the worst players, right? And so, but they really weren't the worst players. Just the perception was they were the worst players, because when they'd go play 5-on-5, if they'd miss a shot, you'd have the young guys over there barking at them about taking a shot, right? Because if you lose, you sit out. So they don't want to sit out. So then they'd be nervous about missing as grown men. And they weren't amazing individual players, but could be amazing team players. So when they came to my side, I got stuck with a guy with 2 hip replacements, who's 59 years old. I got stuck with a guy, who's overweight and can't really, do much on his own against young guys, but maybe against older guys like himself. And my only thing to them was, you're going to be open because I'm going to get double teamed. I just want you to shoot. Just want you to shoot. And it took no joke, 3 weeks or so for them to get to the point where they were comfortable shooting, because they were so used to being scared to miss. And what they found was me getting upset about them not shooting. I'd be like, hey, dude, I'm drawing a double team. You're wide open. I need you to take that shot.
Yeah.
It's okay if you miss. I don't care. I need you to take the shot.
Yeah.
So then they realize that, well, Chris is giving me the green light. He's telling me he does not care if I miss.
Yeah.
He just wants me to take the shot. So then they forgot about missing.
That's interesting. That's a bit of a kind of a joke now, is the idea of a participation award,
Yeah.
right? It's
Oh, yeah.
everyone gets an award just because little Johnny or Sarah showed up,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But I think what you're talking about is a type of it's an actual, I actually participated. I think we appreciate
doubt.
when people participate,
No doubt.
when they take the shot.
Well, and I needed
Right?
them.
There's
I
something
needed them to do.
there's something valuable about someone's willingness to take the shot.
Yeah, well, that is
Not-
as weird as it sounds. That's recreational basketball at my gym.
Right.
That right there was probably the perfect example of the freedom I'm talking about. The second that they felt free to be okay to miss, they started making everything. Like, it was crazy.
This brings back me another.
Everything.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this.
Yeah.
Before.
Well, that's happened to me personally. Yeah.
You know,
It happens
but seriously,
it happens in to bring it back to ping pong again. Another thing I've noticed is, say something interesting happens when someone is really down. You know, in ping pong, you played a 21, say, and then it's game point, and your opponent has 11.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly they can get to 17. You know,
Yeah. That does happen
because they're not going to win, right? There's something shifts.
They play free. They
And then
don't
all of
care.
a
They're
sudden
free.
they're a different player,
They're okay.
right?
They're okay.
They're
to
a
miss.
totally different
Yeah.
player, you know.
Yeah.
They come to terms with the potential that they're not going to get what they want.
And if you could somehow be there, right? If you could try to incorporate a little bit of what creates room for that type of behavior throughout the game, then you'd be a whole different player.
Well, that's probably the number one. Well, before I tell you what I was about to tell you, back to the basketball real quick. This is not an exaggeration. I think maybe we lost like twice against anybody we played against at that point in time. Like, I was in much better shape in terms of basketball shape. Now I'd like be huffing and puffing if I had to stop and start like that, you know, that many times. But I'm still in good shape, but just not basketball shape like that. But I'm not kidding. They probably scored between these three other guys, and they're all older guys. They probably scored, if we were playing to 31. On average, they were scoring 25 points, and I was scoring the rest. And I would only choose to score when, like, we needed a bucket or it was the end of the game. You know what I mean? And then I had to, like, score because, you know, we're going to lose if this shot doesn't go
You were
in.
the ringer.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, and it got to the point where they knew. Like, they reached a point where, like, they knew that the only thing I wanted to ask of them is what they could control in my eyes. So, like, if ever they didn't play hard defense.
It's a good strategy, though. They can't, because you could say, well, let's just not double team them, but then they're screwed.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
I'm going to make you you know what I mean? Until you do double team me, right?
And then they're screwed.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
then you're
yeah.
done. I'll just keep doing it until you decide you're going to double team.
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? Like, I'm just going to expose you then. But what's funny is I would never get on them unless they didn't play defense. Because to me, that's the thing you can control. You can't control about missing shots and making them. I know every time you shoot, your goal is to make it. So I'm not mad at you for missing ever. If you don't play good defense and we start giving up points because you're not playing good defense and you can't take pride in that, that's where you would hear something from me.
That's the just get the ball over the net strategy.
Yeah,
That would
it's
be
like,
the analog.
it's like, dude, hey,
You know?
cover your man. We end up losing because your guy, like, you won't be on my team again. You know what I mean? Like, you can control that. I need better effort. So, like, the guys know me. Like, if someone hit a basketball, hey, come on, guys, we got to pick it up. You know what it's like? Like, they just knew me by then that that's just the way that it worked, right? And so they knew I'd never get upset about them missing a shot. I'm only going to get upset if you choose not to control the things you can control. You know, and what's funny is they went home, they still tell stories about it, like, to this day. Like, I'll talk to these guys who are like, dude, that was the best time, Chris, I've ever had in my life playing. I mean, this is how meaningful it was to them, playing basketball or doing anything. Like, I'd go home and tell my wife, like, that was the best time I've ever had. And I scored, 20 points in this game, and I've never done that before. And, like, Chris is just telling me to shoot. And it's like why we don't give everyone the chance to have a liberated experience is beyond me. Because if the goal is for people to have the quintessential experience, which we all benefit from, because they're a better version of themselves for themselves and then for you, then, like, what's the point if you're not giving them a pass and a pathway to find that space? Like, what's the point? Is your point to make them miserable? Is your point to make them uncomfortable? Is your point to make them
Maybe
self-conscious? Like, what's the point? Is your life that miserable?
It might be.
Are you hurting that much that, like, you want someone
to
to hurt like you? Like, what's the point, right?
It's funny what this now I'm going to get philosophical, all right? But what is a game? What is sports, right? You touched, like, it's a little bit of art, but it's not just art. There's also, like, a physical element to it, right?
There's a score.
There's a score.
There's
And basically what you just broke down with the different theories of, like, how you guys eventually became a winning team. It's just a bunch of different philosophical ways to get there.
100%.
It's just different, okay, we're going to try this. Chris is going to get double teamed, right? And it's just interesting because, like, what is a game? What is sport? Why do we need this? Because there is like the participation trophy thing. There, on the flip side of it, there's a whole part of our society that's going, oh, well, these guys are just too good, and it's only competition. Competition's bad. It's a bad thing. It's around. I mean, that's where these participation trophies have come from.
And it's probably from a whole cultural viewpoint of competition that's more in line with the one that you're pushing against.
Yeah,
which is right, because what
That's it.
you're doing is you're not trying to celebrate excellence, but you're trying to save people from their feelings of inadequacy that they feel because they haven't measured up to something
Right,
great.
right. They didn't get the chance, and it's like a group of people that never got to do that.
You're feeding into this idea that really, your excellence is measured by, how you compare to the people around you, rather than how you compare to yourself.
That's exactly
and your
the
own
problem.
willingness to move forward and to tackle obstacles and to take the shot.
Yeah.
And I'm really celebrating that. That's a real
that's the
participation trophy, but the participation trophy that we're talking about is one that's just like we all give everyone the same award, and then the person who's really done something excellent, we're no longer celebrating, and we should.
Yeah, and so the truth of the matter is sports was always meant to be a mechanism for discovery. That's what it was meant to be. It was a mechanism for me to go out into a place where I'm vulnerable, where I'm uncomfortable, where I'm exposed, and find out my capabilities based on where I began and based on where I'm growing.
Yeah, and meet yourself.
The place I find.
Yeah,
This is why parents have an issue with competition, to Chris's point, is because they're looking at the competition as the competition you're playing against. The competition is you against you. What kind of growth can you have that allows you to feel the same sense of accomplishment as the person who is the best kid in the league? So, this is the problem right here, is that as a very young age, we've sent the wrong message to young people.
Right.
Like, you're competing against some benchmark. Like, this is the goal. Like, reach for the goal, and this is the goal. Well, that's some generic goal that everyone's reaching for. For some people, that goal is very realistic. For others, it's completely unrealistic. But you're telling your son or daughter to, reach for the goal. And it's like, what you haven't done is teach them that it's about the journey. What you haven't done is equip them with the emotional, stability to contend with what happens if they don't reach the goal. In a society that deems you a failure because they live in a two-dimensional world of success and failure, in a society that deems you a failure if you don't reach the goal. So what we haven't done for people,
but it's funny because on one hand,
definition.
it says you're a failure because you didn't reach the goal, and on the other hand, it says everyone gets a participation trophy.
Yeah.
Well,
at the lowest level, they say that. Obviously, not at the competitive level.
Of course.
You know what I
It
mean?
seems
But
like
at the
there's
lowest
two.
levels,
There's a paradox here, which is, and you talked about it before. You said it's really an attitude of realizing that that there's somewhere better to be than where I am now, and having the willingness to move towards it.
Yes.
But there's this other attitude, which is like you're perfect just the way you are, right? Which can sound a little bit corny, maybe it's a little bit placating, but I think there's something true there. And I think both those things can be threaded together, right?
100%.
It's that ability to be okay with missing the shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to not be okay with missing the shot.
Yeah. It's like you're great. Like, there's nothing wrong with you, but would you like to discover more of you?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like,
right.
you just be you, but would you like to discover more of you that could change the trajectory of your life, your perception of yourself, the way you project, like what you want to give, how you pursue the things that you pursue? Would you like to find that space where you become a beacon, right? And without even trying, it's who you are. It's what you've evolved into, right? Like, for you to not explore that space is potentially denying yourself from the quintessential life experience.
Yeah,
and
the adventure.
That's the tragedy,
yeah.
right? Because you don't win by
and that's where you were when you had those injuries and you kept slipping, right? And you just were about to take your cleats off.
Oh,
right?
yeah, like
you realized I could just throw in the towel right now, and maybe I should, but I would ultimately be robbing myself of my only shot to have the quote unquote quintessential life experience, right?
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you here, back to that, the when I went to my first mini camp with my first NFL team, and I had 2 reps and 5 practices, like, I'll never forget. I went to the airport. Back then they didn't have cell phones. Went to the airport. My best friend who I lived with up at Cal Poly, who I knew from my hometown, he's like, bro, call me when the camp is over, right? And so I'm like, yeah, for sure, bro. Because, I knew nothing about any of this, right? And going in, I was so excited. I was like, this is crazy, man. This is real. And I'm finally part of an NFL team. You're really not. Like, you're one of the 90 guys that keep 53. And, like, a bunch of guys getting cut. But for the time being, it's like you're on borrowed time, right? So it doesn't feel like, once you've been there and you've gone through it, then you take it for what it is. Initially, though, when you're, like, naive, you're like, dude, I'm part of the team. This is crazy. My dream.
I'm going to go get laid.
Whatever. You know what I mean? and then like you get your 2 reps and 5 practices, you're like, this isn't the dream, right? So I go to the airport, call my best friend. He's like, bro, how was it? First thing I said was, dude, I'm getting cut. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, you don't get it. You know,
Yeah.
They got 16 wideouts fighting for 5 spots. Got 5 guys coming back from the year before. I got 2 reps and 5 practices. Got jammed out of bounds by the starting corner. Got the wind knocked out of me by the starting linebacker, Junior Seau. I was trashed, dude. There's no way they're inviting me back. And so I go back up to school just kind of expecting a phone call that says, don't come back. You know what I mean? And it never happened. But while I was up there, I recruited some DBs to start working against. I got myself in better physical shape, but probably more importantly, got myself in better psychological shape. And I came back and for the next camp, which was about a month later, it was a 2-week camp. And they had cut 3 wide receivers. I just wasn't one of them. And so because there were less guys, I got a few more reps. I was in better shape emotionally and physically, so I did more with them and did better, and then left there believing like I could do this. And so this was the defining, changing moment for me, was that, and this is what I believe separated me from the other, rookies that were fighting for the same chance that I was, even though it looked hopeless, right? Because all the guys who were getting reps were those 5 guys, and they'd sporadically throw the rest of us in, and I was like the last guy to go in. But I guarantee you that when we had about 2 months to rehearse and practice and get ourselves ready to go to training camp, which is the big camp, right, where your future's decided, I guarantee the other rookies went home lamenting that they felt cheated about the experience. Pissed off
and
about
worried
the fact that they weren't getting more reps.
Yeah.
I'm a dude.
The
Don't they know I
grass
can beat
is
this
too
guy out?
fucked up. You know
what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't think I could beat that guy out if they gave me more reps? They're not giving me a chance. This is BS. So they went home pissed off. I guarantee you. And I went home understanding my reality. I went home going, okay, my reality is they're going to give me 1 repetition, 1 every training camp practice. And with that 1, I got to do something to make them say, well, we got to see him again.
How long is a repetition? Just
like
for
the 7 seconds of me going against 1 DB.
That's it.
That's it. I was going to get 1, dude, in a 2.5-hour practice. 1. And you don't know when that moment's going to come. You have no idea.
You just have to be ready.
You just got to be ready. And think about how hard that is when you're pissed off about they're not giving me a chance. You know what I mean? Like, you can't afford for your energy to be diverted like that. But that's where these other guys were. So I go home for training camp, and I got 2 choices. I can either accept that reality or not. So I accepted that reality. I didn't embrace it. 2 very different things. I accepted it for what it was. So now I'm going to work to be ready for my reality. So what I did was I went home going, dude, you need to turn yourself into someone you've never been. Like, you need to challenge your threshold in ways you've never considered. The second you feel like, you're tapped out, like, you got to find another 10% every day. You just need to train differently. And nothing in my life had ever challenged me to do that. I'd always been good enough to get what I wanted. So it was the first time I consciously was like, dude, this isn't enough. You're number 47. Like, you can't do the status quo. So that's what I did every day. And every day, like, it launched me to another dimension of me. And by the time summer was over, I had turned myself into this dude. I'd gone against that same DB that I went against my senior year in college and just ate his lunch day after day after day. Was so ready to just go torch people. And it was about 2 days before I was going to go to training camp. I woke up one morning. I went in the bathroom. I looked in the mirror and kind of looked at myself and just had this, like, just this amazing moment where it was like, I looked at myself and I'm like, dude, I just love me some me. Like, I've turned myself into this guy I, like, never knew I could be. And, like, I get it now. Like, I win. Like, I made this about having to go show them, why I deserve more reps. That's why I did this in the first place. I was worried that if I didn't make the team, people are going to think I'm a failure. Like, that's such a trite way to approach life. That's not the way to get what I want. I'm over that. Like, I get what this is about now. Like, it's about me discovering what I was meant to be, and me focused on what I can control.
What you did, I mean, it's another sort of cliche, but you learned to love yourself, right?
I learned to make it about me.
But that's another thing that I think gets thrown around on flags a lot, is like, you just have to love yourself, right?
Oh yeah. I mean,
which
really
is true, but I think
so
that
much deeper than that.
You showed is you had to earn it, right? You had to you were able to receive your own validation, but because you earned it for yourself.
Well, I like eclipse this point where it's like only at the highest point can you like reach up and like pull yourself up over this little mountain and then come to the other side where it's like, dude, this is what it was about. So I could see this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like that's what it was about. So I could see like life in myself and, you know, victory from a completely different lens because I already experienced victory and I never looked at it that way. The victory would only be if I made the team. You know what I mean? But now it's like, dude, I just had my victory. So I was like, they could give me 10 reps of practice or no reps of practice. Does that really change the guy that I just turned myself into? And the answer was no. And that's how I felt so
Because you probably
free.
realized in a sense that you were playing a different game all along,
Yeah.
right?
And I never, like, it only came to light in that moment.
Yeah.
And then it just completely freed me, man. When I went to training camp, literally, I was not worried about my moment. I was just like, whenever they call my name, I'm going to go try to find the best DB I can go against. I'm going to try to torch him for 7 seconds and go do it again. And I'm doing it for me. So that's what happened. Like, literally, I was the low man on the totem pole, and then I did it, and they'd be like, whoa. Then I did it the next practice, like, whoa. Then I did it the next, and they're like, whoa. And then all of a sudden, like, it wasn't supposed to be my rep. It's some other guy's rep. And they're like, no, hold on. Chris, come up here. And then you get that guy's rep. And then you do it again. And then you get this guy's rep. And then you do it again. And then you go in earlier. You're the 3rd string or 4th string guy going in instead of the 7th string guy or whatever it is. And then, you know, you find yourself just gradually climbing the ladder. And we scrimmaged the Rams and in like a little scrimmage. And all the young guys only got so many plays. And I had 2 huge plays in that scrimmage where I just ate this dude up on a route and caught this ball over a guy. It was great. And so every time I was out there, I was doing something noticeable. But the irony is I wasn't any longer doing it to get noticed. I was doing it because
Right.
I could.
By
Because
self-forgetting
game.
one finds, right?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it was just
yeah.
me going, this is what I prepared for, so I'm doing it for me. And then we played 3 preseason games and none of us rookies got any play. It was all these 5 guys who they wanted to take a look at. They had to cut down from 90 guys to 65. And I was one of 6 wide receivers left standing.
Are you
And the
familiar
rest
with
had gotten
positive
cut.
feedback loops? Do you know what that means? It's what you've talked about in a couple different ways. Both are considered positive feedback loops, but one you talked about is you slip once and then you slip again, right? And then you're so worried about slipping that you're guaranteed to slip the 3rd
Yes,
time, right?
yes.
That direction, it starts to. The feedback is when you have a microphone and an amplifier, and what gets said into the microphone gets amplified and then
Yes.
picked up by the microphone,
Yes.
and then it goes and goes until you have a screeching sound that can destroy a sound system,
Yeah,
right?
like the air conditioning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it happened the other way, right? Is all of a sudden you make the play, and it's internally validating, and then you're more likely to make the play. There's another thing that a biblical guy, I think, called Matthew's principle, which is there's a line. It's something like, "To he who has everything, all will be given. To he who has nothing, all will be taken."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You become fearless in your pursuits.
But there's got to be that in your game with yourself and with the people that you mentor. It seems like a big part of the art is to start to, you just want to start to move it in the right direction.
Yes.
And if it go, and you see that with, I was thinking too, like, with watching professional sports and even with ping pong, whatever it is, there's the phenomenon of streaks, right?
Yes.
That people get hot and they get cold. And there's, and you can watch the momentum. They'll do that too in sports. They'll do timeouts, right?
Yeah.
Because if there's a certain degree, if that positive feedback loop starts to build momentum,
Yes.
you want to
It's
interrupt
yeah,
it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something happens, right?
Yeah.
Something, at least that's the theory. They wouldn't do it if there wasn't some hope that by stopping that, that momentum that has been gained, that you might interrupt what's happening, and that there might be an opportunity for a new trajectory.
That right there is like a great example. Like as I listen to that, like you could have some people that, I could picture like Novak Djokovic or something who would get, let's say you went to the bathroom too long because you wanted to disrupt his momentum, right? Mm-hmm. He would have a tantrum at some point because, he's pissed off about the fact that you're taking too long on purpose and you're messing up my game. For a guy like me, I get you're trying to play a game. Mm-hmm. So I'm fully aware of the game, and I'm like, I've already prepared myself emotionally and mentally for that game. So I've already calmed myself to the point where I'm like, he's going to do this for a tactic. He's going to do this to be disruptive. So the second he does it, like, I'm just going to go to this great place of peace. We could take as long as he wants. At the end of the day, like, my game isn't with him. Uh-huh. My game's with the ball. I play this internal game with it. So it doesn't matter if I do it, in 10 seconds or I do it in 10 minutes. right? My game's never changing. There's nothing you're going to do to take me away from my game because it doesn't involve you. You know what I mean? So it's like
the game within the game.
I would love that challenge if you're trying to play a game, and all it's going to do is make me more relentless in my pursuit to get what I want, which could be very damaging for you. You know what I mean? Because then I'll be relentless, right? And so that's kind of like, you know, when I had a chance to make that team and it came down to 6 guys fighting for 5 spots, the other guy that was a rookie like me, they love this guy. And this is why, you know, I tell athletes all the time, this isn't about where you are, it's about where you strive to be, right? And like, you can only control what you can control. But if you choose not to control that, then you won't control anything. Like, you'll have you'll be powerless, right? Because your circumstance is going to be what controls you. And it's going to affect everything. This isn't just how you physically play. It's going to affect how you emotionally play, mentally play, psychologically play. So it was just me and this guy that they loved. Like, he was the only guy as a rookie they were asking to come early to practice, to go, like, learn the plays better, catch at the third-string quarterback after practice. Nobody else got invited to do that. So they loved this guy. And it was evident. And so we go into the last preseason game. I know it's he and I who are going to get the fourth quarter to ourselves. So we go into our last preseason game, and they're cutting down from 90 to 65. There's 6 guys left standing. I'm one of them, and this other rookie like me who the team loved. They made, you know, there's no hidden secret. They made it very obvious. They were asking him to come early before meetings and learn the plays better, and asking him to stay after practice to catch him the third-string quarterback. None of us were being invited to do that. So we go into the last preseason game knowing that he and I are going to get the fourth quarter all to ourselves. And, you know, I knew that they were going to do everything in their power to give him a chance to make the team. So it was such a weird moment, because I remember being at such peace about this potentially being like the end of the dream. You know what I mean? Like, I had such peace. I remember jogging out of the tunnel, you know, number 47. And at that point, I had accepted 47. Like, up until that point, honestly, like, when I first got it and I recognized kind of what it meant, I was kind of embarrassed by it. I was like, you know, they're basically telling the world, like, I'm a scrub. No one else has a number like this. Anyone who knows wide receiver positions knows this is not a wide receiver number. And no one else has a number like mine. They have to know, like, that this guy has no chance of making the team. It's really weird how you come to terms with that. So that's kind of what happened. And but by that time, I had done so much that I was like proud. I took pride in it. You know what I mean? That a 47 could still be left standing, right? And I think even my parents were at the game. I remember jogging out of the tunnel, kind of seeing them to the left, and thinking, like, if this is it, man, I feel I have such peace about what I did. You know, and that was kind of that epiphany that I told you I had before I even left for training camp. Like, I've done everything that I can do. Like, I have such peace about this. And I went in that last preseason game. Sure enough, they tried to throw this guy the ball 5 or 6 times. He could not make a play. Like, he either slipped, it was deflected, it was underthrown, overthrown, just could never make a play. I got one ball late in the fourth quarter thrown to me in between defenders, deep down the field, caught like a 26-yard pass, and fell to the ground. Next day's cut day. This guy and I are roommates. It's really just brutal. But he and I are roommates, and the way it works is they give you a call, and they tell you to bring your playbook. The coach wants to see you, and that's how you know that the dream's over. Right? And because we're roommates, we know that when the phone rings, like, it's for one of us, which is almost worse, right? And it's the day, you know, again, back then they didn't have cell phones. So it's a day like you tell everyone you know, absolutely do not call me. You know what I mean? But everyone's on pins and needles because they want to know.
Every call is going to be you know, suspected.
And like your spine, like you have shivers down your spine the second the phone rings. The last thing you want is like, you know, 8 people calling you going, hey, just calling to see how it worked out. It's like, dude, I'll hate you forever. But so it's like that afternoon, what happens is the phone rings, and I'm the closest guy to it, so I got to answer it. And it's like, you don't want to answer it, but you also don't want to be the guy who's being handed the phone, you know, because the guy wants to talk to you. And so I answer the phone, and I say hello, and the guy's like, hey, you know, this is Marty Herney. He was the Grim Reaper. He's the guy that calls you to tell you to bring your playbook, right? And so I was like, hey, Mr. Herney, it's Chris. And so he goes, hey, Chris, how's it going? Like, it's, you know, fine, whatever. And like, and I'm like,
get to the point, motherfucker.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm like, in my heart, I was like, you know what? He's going to tell me it's over for me. And that sucks, but I'm at peace about it. It is what it is. And then he says, I just want to tell you that we like you a lot. We like what you've done. Because of that, we're going to keep you here. I need to talk to Wade.
Damn.
And then, you know, I handed Wade the phone. He got the bad news, and that he never saw another training camp again. That right there was the start of my 8-year NFL career.
Jeez.
And, you know, there were such poignant, profound moments along the way where I continued the journey in the face of like wanting to concede to being a victim. And had I conceded to being a victim, like none of that would have happened. I would have missed the opportunity to have some real revelations in my life, enlightenment in my life to the point where it would change the trajectory of my life, change what I would mean to people, change how it would affect people, just everything. And so this is what I mean. Like, my whole NFL career is a completely different discussion, but by talent, I was good enough to get what I wanted out of my dream. By talent. There's no doubt about it. And I could tell you why, but I don't need to. Like, I would just tell you, like, by talent, I was good enough to get what I wanted. Just from the thing that I told you from San Francisco, the best team in the NFL, they got Jerry Rice, a Hall of Fame wide receiver, so that's their model. You know what I mean? That's their benchmark. And I'm there for a year, and they're telling this guy who the head coach hates, that, meaning the offensive coordinator told me that, I think you're a great player. If we didn't draft this guy in the first round, you'd be starting right now. You could be a great wide receiver in this league. That wasn't the first or the last time I heard that. So like I had the talent to get what I want. It wasn't my path, right? And I accepted that. I accepted that I can't control my path. I can control my experience, right? Two very different things. They did control my path. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that I have to let them control my experience. But that's what we do in life. Whatever our circumstance is, we become a victim to it.
Yeah, I keep thinking about seems like there's this effort to try to get in touch with that one. There's a place where we're totally free and that no one else has any dominion over but ourselves.
Yes.
And trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
Some people are inspired by like Holocaust stories,
right.
Where people in these conditions.
Or like the Count of Monte Cristo is probably the best story for that. Have you ever seen the Count of Monte Cristo? I read the book. So he gets locked away and like he comes out of an 18-year prison system in the worst French prison known to man, and he escapes. But he's more educated. He's a better fighter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they never take that from him. They don't take him from him.
Yeah.
They just confine him in a box.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's his path. That's what he's got. But he trains and trains and trains. And he eventually gets out. And I mean, I encourage both you guys to watch The Count of Monte Cristo. It's an incredible movie.
Yeah. Well, one of the greatest crimes is when we won't let ourselves evolve.
Right.
Right? Like you stop evolving. And that right there is like, if I learned anything, it's like I evolved so much in the face of circumstances that usually make people stop dead in their tracks.
Right.
And then look to retreat.
The word that keeps coming to mind for me now is dignity, which I feel like I need to even look up again and try to get a better understanding of. But that's what you would say, is that they could take everything from me, but they couldn't take my dignity.
They couldn't take my dignity, and they couldn't take my power.
Your spirit.
You know what I mean? Like my
But that's
power.
what when something is dignified, there's a sort of spiritual dimension. There's something sacred about that.
Oh, no doubt. Well, and then again, you're so ready to look at the vision you had for your path and how you envision that beginning and ending, and then you sit back and go, well, like, none of that happened. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't my path. And that's where that's where I came to terms with it, right? Like, okay, so this was the vision, and oftentimes when we don't achieve the vision, that's the moment we feel like we failed. But I look at my path and I look at my journey, and I recognize that I'm even more successful than I ever could have imagined, having achieved the vision. You know what I mean? Because of what I had to overcome. So I'm not a Hall of Famer? Like what? I feel like a Hall of Famer. So you're telling me I have to be a Hall of Famer? I mean, in order to be a Hall of Famer, I have to have 120 touchdowns and 894 catches or whatever it is, and 15,000 yards. Like, no, I disagree. I have a different understanding on life. I have a different understanding of success. I have a different understanding of ownership of my experience, and that being the definition of success, not what you dictate to me based on what I got statistically or in your eyes, because you're not me and you didn't take my path.
Seems like part of it is learning what the real game is, right?
100%.
Getting down to playing the right game.
Yeah.
And that was our first conversation when I first met you.
Yeah.
You started talking about the game inside the game, and I was like, wow.
Yeah. And this is really what I'm trying to do is that what I'm giving people is their power back.
or possibly power for the first time. Maybe they've always felt powerless. But what I'm doing is I'm giving people I'm giving people a look at what happens when you take your power back and you become empowered to take ownership of your experiences, because most people don't feel like they have ownership of the way that they exist. They're at the mercy of their circumstances in life. Yeah. It's like, hey, circumstances are what they are. How does that have anything
where is
to do
that
with
part
ownership?
in you where you are not at the mercy of? You know, there's a million ways that you could say, yes, you are at the mercy of.
Yeah.
You're at the mercy of your coach who just doesn't like
Yeah.
you. You're the mercy, at the mercy of the grass that wasn't cut the right
Yeah.
way.
Or the body you were
100%.
born in. The
But
body,
no
yeah.
matter how long the grass is or what the coach thinks of you, there's still a place where you're not at the mercy of something.
Yeah.
But trying to access that, you probably have to. There's an idea in spiritual paths, which is you don't find out what God. The way you find out what God is you remove everything that God isn't. You know.
Right,
So
yeah.
I forgot, it's like neti neti in Indian, but it's not this.
Yeah.
You know. So it's not a process of finding, but it's a process of discarding the
Yeah.
things that aren't it.
Well, once you know what you're at the mercy of, then you accept that that's not within your control. So then you become empowered to let it go. And that's where the power comes from. Like, I'm no longer going to lament or try to control something that's uncontrollable and then let it control me and change the way that I exist.
To bring it back to 12-step philosophy, the kind of the most well-known prayer is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can,
And the wisdom
then the
to know
wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's
Yeah.
a cheesy little prayer that you can put on a book cover or something
Yeah.
like that. But if you really get inside of how deep that is, there's
Yeah.
a lot to be said there, and it's
Yeah.
in line with, I think, what you're saying as well.
It's not what have I always said? I think I've always said the experience doesn't shape the experience, that your perspective will shape the experience, right?
Right,
It's like
right.
the experience is what it is, but your perception of the experience, your perspective about the experience is going to shape the experience. So again, I could look at myself and think that journey, that 8-year NFL journey, was nothing like I envisioned on so many levels. Realistically, I fell short of being able to achieve the dream. But then I look at the path and I go, wow, but my path, like the things that I overcame to even last 8 years in a career where the average career was less than 3, the things that I was able to achieve, the toxicity I was able to shine and rise above, right?
Transcend.
That was like destined to see me fail, right? But like I wouldn't even allow them the power to infiltrate my space, right? All these things, you go, well, that experience like led me to where I am today, right? So like I won. I actually didn't lose. It wasn't exactly what I envisioned, but I won. Like I moved forward in a way where I was fearless in pursuing what I wanted, and that led me to where I am, which is exactly where I'm supposed to be. You know what I mean? So this is what I mean. When you change your perspective, it is amazing how with the kind of clarity you see what life
It sounds
is all
like
about.
in you telling your
You know what I
story,
mean?
those pivotal moments were not the successes, right? It was the near total failures.
Oh yeah,
Right? It
it's
was
like-
when you got as close as you could to completely throwing in the towel. That's where the success was to be had.
Oh yeah, it's the crossroad, right? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, well here I am. I'm looking at the map. I can go that way or I can go this way. If I make the wrong decision, like I'm going into the lion's den.
And that makes sense.
You know what
when
I
you
mean?
when you first talked about now your life as really being a mentor and a coach to people, you said one of the gifts you had is that you never really had that, when it came to competition, you didn't care as much about the people about you. You just wanted to succeed for its own sake.
Yes.
But it's hard to really impart that to someone if it just comes to you so naturally. But it sounds like that you did have your own moments.
So yeah, I mean,
Which you
there
talked
weren't
about
many.
him. You talked about the coach. You
Yeah.
you finally had the coach that was the impenetrable barrier
Yes.
to your success.
Yes.
Didn't matter how hard you trained.
Yep.
It didn't matter how nice you were. It
Yeah.
didn't matter what you did. You really had an adversity, which was the opinion of someone else.
Yes.
That was completely standing in your way.
Yeah.
And
I think in my case, like
it was the moments like that, your ability to finally, I think you already had the you already had the natural gift for it.
Yes.
But if you had never actually found your own frontier,
Yes.
you wouldn't have the ability to walk someone else through
Totally agree.
their much easier frontiers to step over, right?
Totally agree.
But you had to find your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think, the one thing I think I do really well is although oftentimes when I'm working with athletes, particularly consulting with them, I share my experiences so they understand, like, I'm identifying with you, right? Like, I've been through what you're talking about. And that in itself, like, is like it's a freedom for them to be okay with feeling that they were vulnerable when they know that you've been vulnerable too. You know what I mean? And that you came out on a different side than they are right now.
Yeah.
So it gives them the hope. But I think one thing I'm really good at doing is, although, yes, certain things were innate to me, like that, that inner competition where it was always about me, I never go into my interaction with anybody like looking at myself as the model. I always go in with the empathy as to them not ever having experienced that, and so what do they need to understand so that they can find it, right? So I never really look at myself and go, well, it's easy for, just do this, you know what I mean? It's like, no, I go in like recognizing you don't know how to do that.
I've been thinking about the word encouragement recently for some reason. You think about encouraging, like, you're going to be great. It's just this sort of frothy encouragement. But if you think about courage, is to really give someone courage and the strength to move forward.
Right.
It's a little
100%.
bit different than just
little pat on the
trite,
butt.
compliments that aren't founded in.
Yeah, like you can do it. And it's
Yeah.
like that is the most useless language you could possibly use.
Yeah.
It's like telling someone to be confident.
Yeah.
Well, just go be confident and just go have fun. Well, my coach is a prick and he has nothing but negative things to say. There's no positive reinforcement. I make one mistake, he's going to yell at me and pull me out the game. Like, you tell me how I'm going to have fun in that environment, right? So this is what I mean. Like, you don't control that, but you can completely empower yourself to create the experience that you want within that experience, because there are things about that you do control. They don't know how. Once you teach them how, this is why that internal game with an instrument is so incredibly important, because it's not just that it's going to take that action to another dimension because you're approaching the action from a different place. You're not doing it from a technical standpoint, you're doing it from a mental standpoint. There's a mental signal that's being created for the body to do something rather than the body just trying to do it by itself. So the mind's saying, hey, no, here's the algorithm, here's the game we're playing, I need you to play it like this, right? And so the body is going to respond to what the mind tells it to do. So not only does that happen, but then in playing that game, you're insulating yourself. Like, what you're doing, you're creating this cocoon. You don't realize it.
Yeah.
Because it requires 100% of your energy to win that game. And then what you find is that all your energy goes to being hungry to win the game. It's amazing how quickly you can make somebody who's been petrified to make mistakes hungry for the victory, because they know that they can't lose. Like, at the end of the day, you're not supposed to be perfect. So when you don't get moments that you want, you can't lose. What you're meant to do is process information. So isn't processing information to figure out what you need to do better to create the result that you desire, a victory? Whoa. Like, yeah, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, so you win no matter what.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're giving them the chance to see and define their experience completely differently. That frees them to pursue what they want relentlessly and fearlessly. And once that happens, then all your attention is going to the victory. You want the victory. You're hungry for the victory. In doing that, you've created this cocoon. And when you create the cocoon, it's like nothing else matters at that point, because you can't even hear a coach anymore. You're not worried about your teammates anymore. You're not worried about being yelled at anymore. You don't care what the coach says anymore. Like, none of that matters, because you realize, like, all I care about is winning this for me. Like, that's why I showed up today. When that happens, that's when you give yourself the best version. That's when you give yourself the best opportunity to be the best version of you.
And this is probably speaks to why we like sports and games so much, is because they're all sort of models of something else, And I think
100%.
that same attitude and spirit can be brought into and should be brought into everyday life.
It's why sports never broke me when it wasn't working out. I mean, it broke me for those 3 weeks. And I will say this, like, I had never been happier. In spite of that, like, I loved the Bay Area. My best friend on the team, I love that guy. He was a great guy. He was the first rounder who, was maligned almost immediately in the media. It was just brutal. And he was ultra talented. It was undeserved. He basically put up numbers that, as a rookie, that were similar to the numbers that another wide receiver who turned out to be great, Terrell Owens, put up when he came in the next year as a third rounder. And Terrell Owens was going to be the next great wide receiver, which he turned out to be. He was a great guy. And JJ was getting maligned, for being a bust. And like, this is how ridiculous it is. And so it was just a joke. But up until the point where, I lost myself for those 3 weeks with the coach. I loved the Bay. I loved going to practice. I never loved practice so much. I love the intensity of the environment. I love the challenge of you don't make a mistake in this environment. Like, I embraced it all, and I loved it. I thrived off it. I fed off of it. But then one moment of fear, one brief moment of fear, like, sent me into an emotional abyss and changed my experience overnight, where I hated going to practice. I hated going to the facility.
But again,
trying to survive.
It's the moment you shared, so it was arguably the best part of it all.
Oh yeah, it's like
you were just in your little nice, Garden of Eden before that, of your dream and the Bay Area and all of this, and then the snake came into the garden.
Yeah. Somebody ate an apple.
Yeah, I was the ox that got bitten on the leg by the Komodo dragon. You know what I mean? It was just following me around, waiting for me to collapse. Like, that's in essence what the coach did. And I just, I at the time, again, although I was strong mentally in a lot of regards, I was never faced with that, so I didn't know how to address it, which is why it took me 3 weeks to just fall victim to it before I realized, okay, this isn't working and I'm not okay with this anymore. And I've let somebody steal something from me who never had the power in the first place. I think I just got pissed off. I got really pissed off. I'm like, I went home one night and just had it. Like, and you got to understand, man, it wasn't like you don't go to like practice for 2.5 hours in the NFL and show up and then go home. Like, you don't practice till 2:30 in the afternoon or 2. And you're showing up at 7:30 in the morning to sit through meetings all day and walkthroughs and lunch. So when you have anxiety, like, it doesn't start just before practice. Like, it started at 7:30 in the morning. And I'm sitting in a meeting and all I'm thinking about is, dude, you got to survive practice day. You can't be dropping balls again. He's going to cut you. He doesn't like you. No. And so you're thinking about that for 7 hours straight. You know what I mean? Like, literally you can't get it out of your head. So by the time you get to practice, imagine how wound up you are.
And exhausted, you know what I mean? Not in your best shape.
Yeah, like, I literally felt like completely out of balance. Like, I felt like I couldn't run the way I wanted to run. I mean, it got so bad. I was literally destroying people. But it got so bad that when I was doing like one-on-ones versus defenders, I was purposely getting covered. Purposely not running as hard, purposely not being as explosive, because my fear was that if I beat them so bad that I had 4 or 5 yards of separation and the ball was thrown to me, there would be no question about it being dropped by Chris. So what I wanted to do was have a DB close enough to me that he looked like he was covering me, so he could like deflect the ball, and it wasn't like I technically dropped something.
So it wasn't your fault. You're kind of displacing the blame.
I mean, it got that bad to where like I purposely was doing that. I purposely would go get my ankle tape because I was trying to avoid taking a rep. And so it just crippled me. But then one night I just got pissed off and went home and got sick of feeling that way and just got mad and just like, I stopped rationalizing like the fear and just was like, okay, let's talk about this. I hate this dude right here. This dude's a prick. I don't respect him. Don't like him. He's got no reason to feel the way he feels about me. I didn't know who this fool was 7 months ago. I'm letting this dude change my game. Like, what? I never once played for anybody else. I'm letting this fool change who I am. And I just got pissed. I was like, F that guy. You know what I mean? He's going to do what he's going to do. I don't control that. What I hate is that I let this guy change the fact that I showed up for 7 seconds to go beat somebody who thinks they can stop me, and I've made it about him. So tomorrow, F him. I'm going to go get my freaking 7 seconds back. He can kiss my freaking you-know-what and do whatever the heck he wants. I'm over it. Like, I'm not going to be, beaten like this anymore. And I just got pissed, and I went to bed angry. You know what I mean? Like, I went to bed angry. I woke up angry. I went to my meetings angry. Just sat in there, and I was angry. And for me, that's what I needed, because I was, like, just determined to get my 7 seconds back. But when I went to go line up for my first rep, in doing that and knowing, like, I wanted to win, it was my first time, like, creating a totally different game. So I wasn't just running a route. Like, I was, like, breaking down every nuance of the route as I was actually doing it. So, like, it was like slow motion. I could almost hear every step I was taking. I could hear the DB breathing. I was looking at every little motion of his body. Like that became my focus. Like my desire to manipulate him to do something he didn't want to do, and I became hyper focused on that. Then when I would take this hard step to make him overcommit, I became hyper focused on that. Like that's all that mattered to me, because that's why I showed up. And then when the ball was coming, it was this certain sensation on my hands. I needed it to feel this way in my fingers. I wanted to be able to see the bumps. Like this whole game just changed for 7 seconds, and then it worked. And I was like, whoa, okay, so I'm going to do that again. And then I did it again, and then it worked. And then I did it again, and then it worked. And then it just became like my new world. And once it became my new world, it didn't matter that he was standing 10 yards from me. It didn't matter that he didn't like me. Like I wasn't doing it for him anymore. It was so easy for me to emotionally just be like, F you.
What I find fascinating, though, is that he helped you get into your new world. You know?
He did, yeah. That's the only benefit.
That's interesting.
We're just so peculiar that we seem to run from adversity at every opportunity, but we're so shaped by it.
Because it's painful, man.
I was thinking about...
It's painful.
Well, like tragedy, too. Like you hear some of these stories from people that have these horrible, like tragic moments where, the whole family's killed and they transcend it and they become like, like Eckhart Tolle, for example. He was going to jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
And then just in that lowest low of his moment, he's looking over the San Francisco Bridge. Yeah. He's just like, man, maybe I should die. Maybe I should jump. He becomes this like spiritual teacher that travels the world.
But I guess those are the stories that were interesting. Even Eckhart Tolle, I heard him say, like, imagine a movie where nothing goes wrong. You'd be bored to tears.
Yeah, it would suck.
Yeah. I mean, and this is life, but when it's painful, you want to retreat, especially if you feel like there's no way I can fight this battle. Right? The natural response is to retreat because it's going to eat you up. You're going to lose. Mm-hmm. You're going to get, you're going to get emotional death potentially from it.
And sometimes that's probably wise. There's certain things that are worth retreating from. Yeah. But I think when we retreat from ourselves, that's when we're in big trouble.
100%. Right? Because you have, life is waiting for you. So you can't do that. That's not an option.
Yeah.
But I tell people all the time, like when I talk about my story, it's amazing how empathetic it made me. Not that I wasn't before, but because I went through it, I tell people all the time, like I would never want anybody to go through what I went through, because I'm built in a way that I was able to withstand it and then reach a point where I became empowered by it. Most people don't have that ability. And if it were them, that's the person that God, I got cut the next year. Months after the offensive coordinator told me I could be great, the head coach cut me, however many months later, the week before the season. Like, it was just a total joke. And you got to stay there the whole time, like, fighting for something that is hopeless, right? And that was true. But it was just a joke. But what I tell people is, like, it was painful. He cheated me. If I were to be honest, like, he definitely cheated me out of something. You know what I mean? Like, if I were to be completely honest, like, if I would have had my St. Louis Rams coach at the time that I had that 49ers coach, I would have been a starter for 9 years in the NFL. Wasn't my path. I'm okay with that. It means nothing. Like, it's okay.
Yeah,
I'm just being realistic, though.
Yeah,
I'm being realistic.
were in a jail cell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just being realistic about that, right?
Exactly, yeah.
That being said, like, I was cheated of something that I worked really hard for. I understand that there are people in this world who, if that happened to them, they're going to go into the abyss and they're going to punt in life because they're going to be so bitter and angry that they're going to become toxic to themselves. And that's when they retreat. That's when they look for outlets. That's when they get abusive. That's in whatever way. It could be you're beating your wife. It could be you're beating a girlfriend. It could be you do drugs. It could be you rob banks. It could be whatever it is. But you're going to be so bitter that you retreat and you become what we talked about. Like, now I'm just going to say F you, and I'm just going to be the worst version of me since you didn't give me what I wanted. And now this is my way of taking that power back.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be a victim to it, and I don't recognize that I'm losing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, I understand that if I were built differently, that easily could have happened to me. Thank God it didn't, so that I could, move through that and acquire all the information.
It's really not hard to understand how people go down that path. It's actually harder to understand how they don't.
100%.
Well, and
100%.
And that's why conversations, I think, like this are so important. Like,
it's yours.
But when you hear it from your mouth, and it comes from a place, that's the one thing. There's also this line of humility that you have. It's not like you're saying, I'm the best, I'm better than you, all that crap, like ego shit. It's like, no, I'm going to be the best version of myself.
That's it.
Right. And you're not trying to, like, come up on somebody. So I think people need to hear this. I mean, that's part of the reason why we started this thing. It's the Logosphere. Like, we want to talk about these different topics and
well, you got to
bring
live
them to
for
life.
you.
Yeah,
you got to
exactly.
live. I can even look back in high school and stuff, and in junior college and college, and like I love being around parties and partying, and people always try to get me to party. It just wasn't my thing, but I love being around it. Like, you were never gonna get me to be something that I didn't want to be. You know what I mean? Like, so even back then, I stood firm and like, I want to be this for me, right? And I'm so good with that, even if you're not, right? And so I always had that piece about it. Like, I'm not here for you. I'd love for you to embrace who I am. I'd love for you to respect who I am. I'd love for me to mean something to you in your life. But at the end of the day, whether you do that or not, doesn't change one thing about who I know that I am. And that's what drives me every day I get up, right? So I love that about me, because I know that that's the right thing to be. That's the right way to pursue life. That's a right way to live.
It reminds me of that prayer,
you know?
To thy own self be true. Or,
Yeah.
right, yeah. I mean, that's it, right?
So I have
there.
so much. I even got sweated in the
Shakespeare?
NFL, dude. I
Yeah,
even got
yeah,
sweated in the
yeah,
NFL.
yeah.
Like my first NFL team, wide receivers on that team, who came from, the South, and I didn't. I'm from Ventura, California, and I looked different at that time. I had the good hair, you know what I mean. And so people thought I was like this pretty boy or whatever. And I talked different because I'm from
thought you were
Ventura.
pretty? They thought you were pretty?
Don't ask me why, but I talked different and stuff like that, right? I didn't talk like with the Southern drawl and like Southern Black English. Like, I just didn't do that. And it was funny, and it even happened at Ventura College, because I'm at Ventura College, and my best friend was this 5'10" white surfer guy, in the 5.0 convertible, dropping rap, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, at that point in time, Ventura College had the equivalent of like Kentucky basketball of junior college. Like, they were the most insane junior college basketball program who recruited across the country and got like the prototypical everything, like 10 players deep of like the prototypical everything. It was an absolute joke. This is not an exaggeration. You'd have to get to the junior college game like an hour before the game to get a seat. The place was
so crazy.
Packed. I'm talking about like the 6'11" center.
What year is it? What year is this?
This is like, like 89, 90.
Wow.
Okay, and I'm just telling you, like, the 6'11" center, the 6'10" forward, the 6'9" shooting forward, the 6'7" guard, like the 6'3" point guard.
In high school?
No, this is junior college.
Oh, junior college.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on the bench, there's like the replicate of that. You know what I mean? It's like, so it was like insane, and like it was just a show, and everybody like loved that show. But they got guys from the Bronx, from Atlanta, from Chicago, everywhere, right? So, fast forward, I'm in junior college now. I'm from Ventura. I decided to go there, and I'm just this unassuming, black guy who's cruising around campus, and my best friend's like, the 5'10" surfer guy who doesn't look like those guys, and a lot of the black guys who are on the team, they're from Oxnard and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So they were a better fit for the guys who were coming from Chicago and stuff. Like, I just grew up differently. I grew up in a different place with different people, and so that was my life, right? And I've never considered myself anything other than what I am, right? I love being exactly what I am. I love being black. I love being exactly what I am, right? But I've never considered myself like I had to be X. I'm just me, right? Yeah. And that works for me. But it was interesting as,
Yeah, you probably got a lot of flack for that, though. Huh?
Didn't really get flack for that until these guys came from other places. So it was funny because I was at Ventura College. We're going through training camp. School started, and I'm walking through campus, and I'm with my best friend. And it was interesting. All the dudes from the basketball team who came from all over the place would be like kind of in this one quad area, and some of the guys from the football team. And then I'd walk by, and they'd never say one word to me. Never acknowledge me, where they were acknowledging other like football guys that were black guys. Yeah. And they'd never acknowledge me. Like they just always kind of just looked at me and just kind of vibed me, which doesn't affect me at all. Like, I couldn't care less. But it was so interesting because they'd never seen me play football, and I look like this unassuming pretty boy. I'm like 172 pounds, whatever. Yeah. And I don't look like I'm intimidating, but I play like a Rottweiler. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so like, once I get on the field, like I'm gonna play like a monster, right? Yeah, and so. What's funny is their coach required them to be the chain gang on game days, meaning they have to hold the chains for first down and fourth down and whatever, and then go run the balls in and wipe the balls down. They had to contribute, and their basketball coach made them do that. So they go out there, had never talked to any of these guys because they vibed me or whatever, because I wasn't whatever.
You didn't fit the mold.
I wasn't black enough.
Yeah.
And then I go out there and play my first game, and I score 2 touchdowns in that game, like a punt return to the crib. I blow some dude up on like a blocking play right in front of our sideline, like coming back and peeling back and like literally decleating this guy right in front of everyone where they just go freaking nuts. And I'm just this quiet guy, but I play like ferocious, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I play like the guy that is the dream guy that
Yeah,
from anywhere,
everybody's
you know what I mean?
gawking over.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So next thing you know, on Monday, there's this music artist named Babyface, right? And so next thing you know, on Monday, I'm walking through campus and I walk by those guys with my boy and all of a sudden, Babyface, you know what I mean? Like, what's up, man? And it's so interesting because, like, this is what I mean. Like, I'm not changing for you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here to please you. I love what I am. I love what I strive to be every single day. I love me some me with all my imperfections.
Right.
I love me some me. And every day I strive to be a better version of myself because I know I have something to contribute by doing that, right? And so whether you like that or not, I'm not here for that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here for me. And if you choose to take that energy, if you choose to take that love, if you choose to take that awareness, and you choose to, invite that into your life, man, I'd love that. If you don't, I couldn't care less. Like,
right.
I've always found it interesting, like, I could care less. No, I couldn't care any less than I care right now. I'm not here to worry about what you think of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you're never going to qualify me. I'm never going to let you qualify me. You know what I mean? And that's what I've always been really good at, is it's like, this is who I am. You can like that or not like it. You're never going to change me. You know what I mean? Ever. Because I know that my path is a trajectory that we all should be on. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with me trying to be the best version of me for everything that I do and everything I come in contact with. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's a fantastic place to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
That was good. I mean,
thank you for coming out.
We've filled these memory cards, so
Yeah, it's only been like 7 hours.
but we'll have to have him come back.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can get in. Oh, and I mean, if you want, I mean, we don't have any viewers yet, but you're doing an online.
What the hell am I doing this for? We don't have viewers, man.
That's why you're here. You're going to get us
What the hell
some.
am
You're gonna
I
get us
doing
some.
here, man?
We thought, hey, Chris Thomas, an NFL player. Come on.
What the hell, man? What kind of shopper we
We're just
running
trying to
here?
exploit you for who you are, bro.
Yeah.
Come on.
You got the air conditioned, the freaking background. You got the GoPros turning off. Like, what the freak? We got no viewers. What the hell, man?
That's how we do it, man. But it's better than it was last week.
That's fun.
Last week was a little rougher.
Not that it was rough. I was just trying to tie it into his philosophy about being better than
Oh,
your.
yeah. That's fun.
All right.
Oh, man.
With that, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me,
do you
guys.
want to plug, like, you're doing an online course, like, what is it? It's
I am. Yeah, it's scared to fail, free to succeed.
Okay.
Can we talk about that for 2
Yeah,
seconds?
yeah.
Okay.
I want you to plug it so we can
Yeah,
have
yeah.
it. Yeah.
To the no viewers.
Yeah, but
We want to get it out to nobody as fast as we can.
we're practicing. We're
Yeah, that's
practicing.
funny.
Yeah.
No, so during COVID, I was inspired to create an online course.
Right.
As I've made working with athletes my life. I left a 14-year, financial advisory career at Merrill Lynch so that I could focus on doing what I'm doing now, but full time. So COVID led me to investing in creating and learning how to create an online course. That allows me to reach out to the masses and not just the people that can touch me physically in my own backyard. So that's what I've done. I've created a 10-week course that has centered around what I believe is the most critical component of really any part of your game, but particularly the mental game, and that's the emotional game.
Everything we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's the emotional game that is the absolute most destructive for everybody in their sports experience and people in life, right? Like,
doesn't matter.
It's the emotional
be an
component.
Actor. It could be anything. Yeah.
It's the emotional component, and so I've created a 10-week course called Scared to Fail, Free to Succeed, right? Which I think summarizes like exactly what happens. We're scared to fail, but we'd love to be free to succeed. Well, that's what this is going to teach you. It's going to teach you how to understand the 5 emotions that have crippled you, which is judgment, perfectionism, expectations, pressure, and fear of failure, and give you a full understanding and inside look at how those emotions have affected the way that you've allowed yourself to perform and affected how you felt emotionally. So it's going to give you that clarity. With that clarity, it's interesting. With that clarity, you feel almost empowered at the fact that now where some of those emotions were coming from, or all of those emotions were coming from. So when you understand where it's coming from, then you feel like you can move on from them. When you don't understand where they're coming from, you don't have that clarity, it's hard to feel like you can move away from that.
You trip over them.
Yeah.
They just keep
You know what I
rearing
mean?
their ugly heads every 5
Yeah,
minutes.
because you don't know why, but when you give them the clarity,
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh. So that makes 100% sense. That's exactly what I was feeling.
Identification.
So now where do we go, right? So it's really
uncover, discover, and discard.
yeah. So what then happens is we then redefine all those emotions and the game and the experience that they should have otherwise been having.
So in the
And
same
that's where
way,
the
you go
empowerment
from
comes in.
scared to fail, and you move to free to succeed.
Free to succeed, to
you
go
move from
pursue.
judgment to
Judgment to objective observation.
When are you
even
going to
from-
launch that? Is that launched or is it?
So yeah, I'm just finishing my marketing videos right now.
So make sure to plug
editing
us,
those.
you know.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We
Like,
need viewers.
is there
Yeah,
a way? Is there a
right.
way someone can find this program? Is it up yet?
So I will have a webinar that I'm going to be doing, and so in that webinar there'll be like a link that for me I will use my social media Fusion Odyssey, even though that's not a huge place for me. I don't market a lot on there. I don't even post really like I should, but I have great posts, I should say. But
Yeah, and I would encourage anybody to look up Fusion Odyssey because the little videos you have are cool.
Yeah, they're really cool.
They're really cool. Yeah.
So I will it'll be on social media where you can find the link for the free webinar. And in that webinar, then that will lead you to determine if, you want to invest in learning how to play this completely different game. So you can play like you've never played before, and for the first time in your life, have your emotions be a constructive force in your performance as opposed to a destructive force. So I'm probably realistically 2 to 3 or 4 weeks out from starting my 30-day marketing for the course.
Right.
For the webinar. And then once the webinar is done, the first one, then it'll be 10 days after that the course will actually launch. So it's going to be a great course. Everything will be recorded. So if someone misses an actual session in any 1 week, that they'll be able to go and log in and be able to watch it on their time, which is what I did for my course, and it was awesome. So yeah, there's nothing really like that, I don't think, because this is deeper than sports psychology. This really is teaching them how to create a different connection and relationship with actions that have created paralysis and emotional distress, right? So it's not just like, hey, let me help you visualize and be in a better emotional. No, this is let me recreate the synapse and the connection between you and an action that has created emotional
And an
distress
action
for
being
you.
like being able to juggle a soccer ball or swishing over,
passing, shooting, hitting a tennis ball,
like actual things.
Yeah, and it is real. If we
Yeah.
had time, the examples I
Right,
could give you would
right.
be insane.
Yeah.
Like insane.
Well,
we don't have time for that.
We'll have you come back on. Maybe down a little down the road once we get.
once you
our
get it
feature.
launched too.
Yeah,
I think it's
that's
a fantastic thing you're up to.
Yeah.
I'm
it
eager
really,
to
it's
see how
really,
it
it's really
goes.
inspiring, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's my way to get out to the masses. I have some people who are willing to help me with the marketing aspect. So that's what I need. I'm like I've told them, and I say, me, Jess. I say
Yeah.
this really humbly. I'm the multi tens over $1 million product.
right.
In my space, I own this space. And if I could just get the marketing, like I'm going to make you millions and I'm going to make millions.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
not my strength, marketing. My strength is you handle logistics, you handle the marketing, you handle getting the bodies there, and I'm going to be the multi-million-dollar product.
Right.
And I own this space. So,
Yeah.
that's all I need. And so I have a couple people who I believe are going to
That's
serve that
awesome.
role, and hopefully they do. And not in it for the money, but I'm in it for the effect, and the money's a byproduct of that. And with that money, I want to do great things to give people hope.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
take the people from the inner city and give
Yeah.
them a glimpse at what life looks like, outside of the walls that they think that they're contained by.
Right.
I want to do stuff like that
Right.
and give them hope and give them motivation to not subscribe to, well, this is all I got. Like, no, it's not, dude. You got everything it is that you want so long as you're willing to see it.
Well, I think you've overcome a lot, and you're doing a great thing with the gifts that you've received as a product
Yeah.
of that. So
Yeah,
thank you for
so,
coming
thank
on.
you guys for
Thanks,
having
man.
me.
Appreciate it.
Talking
All
to us. Had a fantastic
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.